Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 128. It's Wednesday, the 14th of June. Dennis Schrader here with Kasper Ozolowski on an interesting week in MMA down in our neck of the woods, Cass.
Yeah, UFC New Zealand, or UFC Auckland, I should say, is just behind us. What a fun card that was. The main card was a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of things to discuss from that card. And, of course, as per usual on Submission Radio, sexy guests. We've got Alex Volkanovski, one of the big winners from UFC Auckland, a man who has a very interesting story. We've interviewed him before at UFC Melbourne, but we've never had him on the actual program officially, so wanted to get him on. Man was a former rugby player, used to weigh 97 kilos. That's 210 pounds competing as a featherweight now. So I want to get a lot of fun rugby stories from him. Speaking of big guys, Roy Nelson is on the program. Never had Roy on the program before. He has just recently been added to the Bellator heavyweight roster. So what better time to have Roy Nelson on the program? Also, Tito Ortiz has been in the headlines recently with this whole Chuck Liddell situation. He's, of course, the manager of Chris Cyborg. So there are a whole bunch of things to speak to. We were actually going to have another guest. There was going to be 5 guests in total. We won't say who, somebody from the McGregor clan, but unfortunately a last-minute pullout has sidelined that. But nevertheless, a sexy show, and we're not even done yet. We have another guest on the program, don't we, Dennis?
That's right. Our friend John Morgan joins us from Singapore to talk about what's going on over there. It's pretty crazy. They're over at that Marina Bay Hotel, the one with the infinity pool up the top that looks like a ship. I think the fighters are over there, so interested to see the content from him and also the vibe over there in Singapore. It's always interesting in Singapore. When I go there, I'm always curious as to the vibe that you get there. It's a very strange, cool, but different vibe. So interested to see what he says about that. He'll be giving us his thoughts about UFC Auckland and also previewing some of the big fights from the main card from Singapore. So stay tuned for that. And for everybody wondering why Dan Hooker isn't on the show, believe you me, we tried to get him on. Unfortunately, Dan is on a farm with his family with no reception. So we will have him on in the future. He obviously had a great big win, but don't worry, we'll be discussing it later on in the show like Kasper mentioned. So a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff to get through, a lot of fun, sexy guests on the program. A quick reminder for everybody to follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, like us on Facebook, jump on iTunes and leave us a review. We love reading your reviews. But without further ado, we have our first guest on the line, and Kasper, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is coming off a big win over Mizuto Hirota at UFC Auckland. He is now 2-0 in the UFC and riding a 12-fight win streak. A man with dynamite in his hands, Alex the Great Volkanovski. Welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
I'm very good, very good. How are you guys?
Very well. And Alex, we have to ask you, where are you joining us from at the moment? Are you still in New Zealand or have you come back to Australia already?
No, I'm back home now. Back home, just having a coffee right now, and I'm eating some Kingston biscuits.
Love some Kingston biscuits. That's our guilty treasure.
Yeah,
are you like us? Are you smashing one packet in one sitting?
No, I'm not too. Back in the day, give me a couple of fights ago, I probably would have, but I'll be pretty responsible nowadays after my fights.
Now, let's talk about fighting in New Zealand. What was it like fighting overseas? You fought in Guam a couple of times, but other than that, all of your fights have been in Australia. What's the biggest difference between fighting in New Zealand compared to fighting at home?
It didn't really feel outside of Australia, to be quite honest with you. I had the same people around me that I'm sort of used to, and I got to train there at City Kickboxing with guys I knew, so I don't know. It's just, to be honest, I didn't even really think of it as overseas. So I guess that's a good thing.
Did you get a chance to explore Auckland much, or was it straight home after the fight?
I didn't. We ended up going straight home. That's one thing that I love about New Zealand is like the landscapes and the mountain. I actually do a little bit of hunting and fishing and adventures and all that sort of stuff. And, what better place to do it than New Zealand? But unfortunately, I had to get back to the family and we got the flight, the next day. So I was spewing about that, but I'll be back there. I'll go back there and, I'll definitely get to, go through the landscapes there one day.
Don't tell us you didn't get a chance to celebrate that night. We're expecting to hear there was a big celebration after the big win over Hirota. Are you saying there wasn't any big parties? We're expecting strippers, dancers, confetti everywhere.
No, there wasn't actually. Because I ended up having like a little small fracture in the orbital, and I was just waiting for doctors to let me know if I could fly the next day. Because of just because of the air in the sinuses, and like because I end up blowing my nose, and my whole eye just puffed up, like the air just went straight into the skin or something. I didn't know that actually happens, but supposedly it's pretty common. And it literally just ballooned up. That's why I looked swollen. It must have just been the air in there.
That's crazy. We remember seeing the post-fight interview. We just thought, a couple of bumps and bruises, but a broken orbital. What have you sort of seen the doctors about it? And do you remember when exactly it happened in the fight?
I do remember. I actually thought it was an eye poke.
Oh.
I think it was in the second round, and it wasn't much in it at all. I think I walked into a jab. I don't think it was our eye poke because I ended up looking at. I think it was just a sort of stiff jab, like there was nothing really in it, but just that knuckle got right inside the eye. I remember sitting there, I thought he gave me a little eye poke. I remember you actually see me like wipe my eye, but I think that's exactly when it happened. But it didn't take long till I got the vision in that eye back straight away, pretty much. So was nothing to worry about.
What are the doctors saying? How long is a recovery from a small crack in the orbital? Would you be out for a certain amount of time? Is there any kind of clear indication how long you have to wait till you can, I suppose, get back in the gym and get back at it again?
Well, probably a few weeks off, sparring and all that sort of stuff, contact directly to the face. But there was it wasn't out of line or anything like that. Everything was pretty good, but there's just a little, like honestly, they said it's a small fracture. They said its recovery time won't be too long at all. So I'm not too worried about it. I'll be able to train. I'll be able to do pretty much everything else. I'll just make sure I won't get hit in the face for the next few weeks, I guess.
Yeah, great. Well, that's good because you're obviously coming off a lot of momentum, so it's good to see that you'll be able to come back soon. Before we talk about the fight... I
want to get back in there straight away.
Oh, absolutely. Before we talk about the actual fight itself, Alex, we've been dying to talk to you about your past. One of the crazy things we read this past week was that when you played rugby, you used to weigh 97 kilos. For those in the States listening, that's 214 pounds. And it's crazy considering that you fight at 145 pounds at the moment. I'm just wondering, how did it feel when you had all of that extra mass on that frame? What was it like walking around at that weight?
Oh, man, I was like a balloon, mate. I was just round. I was, I was always being bulky, like sort of bulky, but definitely, obviously, a lot of fat there as well. And that's why I still got that sort of stocky sort of build. But yeah, man, I was just real thick, and it's just I don't know, like it was just normal back then, I guess. Like I didn't even back in the day, I didn't think I was too fat, I guess. But I look at the photos, I go, yeah, I was definitely pretty overweight. But it's definitely the lifestyle change is just crazy. Now I'm eating pretty good and I eat comfortably as well still, and I can just stay at a good weight now. So it's definitely a good change for the better. But I don't bloat up like I used to actually, because my first few featherweight fights I used to fight and fight at 66 kilograms, and then within 4 or 5 days, like literally 4 or 5 days, I'll be back up to like 86. But that's just water. I just used to, I used to just hold a lot of water. And that's why even now when I fight, I usually, after the weigh-in, I'll put it on 10 kilograms fight day,
Wow.
So it still goes there, but I don't really bloat up over, 76 or something anymore. My body's just slowly starting to get used to these weight changes. And it's definitely making my weight cuts a lot easier now.
For those not familiar with rugby, we've got a lot of listeners that are international. Talk to us a little bit about the kind of parallels that you guys have between rugby and wrestling, because from what we understand, we've had some people that we've trained with in the gym before, previous rugby players and league players, and their takedown defense is just naturally really good because they know how to use their hips and they know how to stay up. They also know how to get their arms around your legs and sort of trap you and put you down. Did you find that when you first started doing your wrestling to stay in shape, rugby sort of helped you with some of those core basics that make wrestling work?
Definitely would have helped a little bit. But I actually done wrestling before I played rugby league. I done maybe like a year or two of wrestling. So that was I played soccer and then I done wrestling when I was about 12, I think, 12 to 14 maybe. And I was like national champion and stuff like that, and I just gave it up pretty much straight away and then played rugby league. So I'm guessing the wrestling definitely helped me with the, good base to have, and good core and just, I was always very hard to tackle and, a strong defender and stuff like that. And my wrestling definitely would have helped with that. But definitely the rugby league, obviously the contact and as you were saying with tackling and all that and, they even bring wrestlers in to help them with their defense, like a lot of the coaches do. So it's obviously there's a bit of a similarities in there, and it definitely comes and helps each other out, I guess. So definitely I could see why some of the rugby league players would be hard to take down.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you sort of ever look at rugby players and think, man, like you would be great in MMA, you should transition? Because I feel like some of Australia's best athletes, they are in rugby, especially some of the, the bigger guys that have that agility. And MMA, like, really needs talented heavyweights. It'd be great if there was sort of a big crop of Australian heavyweights all of a sudden coming from, guys that instead of going to rugby came into MMA. Yeah,
100%. Being athletic definitely comes a long way, and being naturally fit, and they're probably some of the hardest things to accomplish. So that definitely plays a big part. Obviously skills you're going to need it, but it's just being athletically gifted and fit goes a long way. So they definitely could make a change, and you probably will start to see stuff. MMA is getting so big in Australia now, like. Yeah, don't be surprised if you start seeing some of these NRL players give it a go, and you never know, they might be fighting on the same card with me one day.
I'm curious because playing rugby or league, that's a pretty big deal over in New South Wales where you are. I mean, that is the main sport, and for people listening overseas, it's kind of like sort of playing a high level of basketball or American football. There's a lot of fans. There's money to be made, a lot of sports coverage on that. When did you first kind of feel that you wanted to make this transition into MMA? Because especially for where the sport was when you first kind of made that transition, it wasn't where it is now. And to a lot of people, they kind of look at it as a bit of a risky move considering you were doing so well in another sport that was so popular.
Yeah, there's a lot of my friends and teammates and all that thought I was crazy when I wanted to make the change, because I never made it to the NRL, which is that's like the UFC of MMA pretty much, but that's more national level. But I mean, so I don't think I was ever going to really make it. I'm a competitive sort of guy, so and knowing that I didn't think I was going to make it, even though I've made a lot of rep sides, so just sides that are just under sort of NRL. Because I knew I wasn't going to be at the pinnacle of the sport, I was like, I had a couple of fights my last year of rugby league. And we won that, the grand final. I got player, man of the match, and just, it was a really, really good year for me. And I had a couple of fights that year, and I won them pretty, significantly. So I was like, what, I'm going to give it, I ended football in a good year, so I might give MMA a crack. And then, 5 years later, I'm in the UFC. So it's been considering how long I've been training for, I think 6 years I've been training MMA for, and already been in the UFC is pretty unbelievable, especially, I wish I started younger, I guess all MMA fighters say that. But, what do you do? But again, I'm still got so much room for improvement. A lot of people don't realise how new I am to the sport, and you can only imagine in a year or two where I'm going to be fighting at this level.
Well, we've got a lot of friends who are athletes who try to be pro athletes. And I guess one of the things I picked up from talking to them is for them, one of their goals is to make it to that top level, to make it to that NRL, to make it to that NBL, to make it to that professional peak where they could say, look, we're playing with the big boys. We're here with the best of the best. When you finally made it into the UFC, and I mean, it was a really, really long journey for you. A lot of people felt like you should have been there a lot sooner. Was that almost like an achievement for you being able, because in rugby, you mentioned how you felt like you weren't going to get up to that NRL level, getting up to the top level in MMA in the world. Was that almost like a little bit like achieving a little goal of yours in the back of your mind, making that professional level in a sport?
Yeah, 100%. Like as I was saying with my career, it's like pretty, it's over 6 years. It's gone so quick, sort of like considering when I started. But from when I was trying to get in the UFC, which was a couple of years ago, I was pushing. I already had a really good winning streak. I was pound for pound in Australia, took out a lot of the national titles, world title, etc. I was pushing for UFC for a while, and that's, as you were saying, a lot of people are like, man, when's this guy going to get in? What's he got to do? I was already 7-8 fight win streak, and I just kept winning and beating, fighting at so many different weight classes as well, taking out titles in welterweight down to featherweight. So a lot of people were pushing for me, and to finally get that, obviously for me as well, I want to do this. This is what I do for a living at the moment, and I've got a family. So just a relief to know that I got that, bit of a backing in the UFC. It was just, as I said, a relief. It really was. I'm just finally, I'm here, Now I've got a bit of direction. I can really, commit 100%, and mark my words, I'm going to be hitting these top ranks soon. And, it's only up from here.
And I'm just wondering, you mentioned that you were pushing to get into the UFC for so long. What exactly happened? How come you didn't get that call earlier when you were having these impressive fights and these impressive streaks? Did you have any contact with the UFC? Did they give you any sort of reasons or messages, or did you just not hear from them for a long time?
It was just that time of when I was trying. They weren't really signing anyone. It was before, I don't want to get into too much there, but before that, the new owners and stuff like that, there was a time where they weren't really signing anyone. Mm-hmm. They were just, because there were so many people on the rosters and all that, they were just, because, a lot of people are going to get injured, and then they're going to get desperate and they have to sign people. So I guess they were always, you know what I mean? That was a big part. And like they would tell us, we'll see what comes up. And there was a couple of chances where there was an injury, and then short notice you get in. That's how a lot of people were getting in at the time. That's like pretty much the only way in, especially in the featherweight and lightweight division, like, the real stacked divisions. Yeah. And that was the case. And I had opportunities. I don't know if you knew, but I had a couple of, one opportunity before, and had a management company that had nothing to do with me, sort of ruined that for me. I won't get into detail on that. So that ruined my, my opportunity, and it was about 6 months after that is when I actually got signed. So I guess, I try and think positive all the time, and it was meant to be, everything happens for a reason. I guess in this game you have to, try and be positive, because there's so much negatives in this sport. But, I stuck to it, and I'm here now anyway. So, I don't really care about that. But that's sort of what the problem was. Back then, it was just the fact that, they got stacked divisions, and they can't just keep signing people, because then they sign everyone, then people get injured, then they've got to re-sign new people because they're desperate, and then all of a sudden, they've got to get rid of people as well because there's too much people in the roster.
It's an interesting time, because we don't want to go into what happened with the management company, but like you mentioned, you got close to being in the UFC a number of times. People felt like you needed to be in the UFC with the streak that you were doing. They weren't signing that many people at the time, like you mentioned, but you've got your family, you've got your wife, you've got things going on. What was it? Was there any time leading into that? I know you're a positive guy, but was there any time leading into that you got close to sort of giving it up and doing something else? I mean, there's not much money to be made fighting locally in Australia, so there must have been a lot of pressure and stress on you in terms of that kind of regard.
Yeah. Well, I've always been that confident, because I've been training with UFC fighters and high-level guys for a long time, so I knew I was more than ready for UFC. I knew I was always going to make it, so I was always confident like that, but I just wanted it to hurry up. But if I had to choose a time where that was sort of my lowest point, it's actually funny, was probably a week. I think it was a week or a week and a half before I got signed. So it was really, really funny. I just had a low point. I was really pushing, and I just had a bad week. And then, I even remember being at about to train, and then I just got the shits once, and I actually went home, which I've never done before. I ended up going home just because I was angry, and just it sort of got to me. It was weird. It was only little things then, but it just sort of man, what do I got to bloody do? And that weekend, I ended up getting my major sponsor. So first off, I got a major sponsor, which definitely was oh, how good is that? You know what I mean? And then I think the weekend following was when I got signed. So it was within a week and a half, just two probably the lowest point, and then just two massive, just positive things that just happened and really bang, just turned around that quick. So there you go. Yeah, probably a week and a half before I got signed, I was at my lowest point, but luckily I didn't give in.
Wow. I'm always amazed by these stories where people make it, but a lot of the times behind the scenes, people don't realize is they're actually very close not to making it. So it's always inspirational in that sense. And here you are on a 2-fight win streak. I'm curious, what was it like being in the octagon this time around compared to the first time in Melbourne? I imagine the first time there would have been a lot of pressure. I don't know if you really felt the octagon jitters because your performance was good, but were you a lot more comfortable this time around because you got this first one out of the way? And did you feel like you got to show more of yourself this one against Hirota?
I'm always pretty comfortable in octagon, to be honest with you. That's one thing that I've always been good at. I don't really get too nervous, and I keep a cool head. You know, I don't get mad or anything like that, and then, you know, I don't G myself up and then, you know, just go wild. I guess my style is sort of like that anyway. It looks like I'm just going hell for leather, but, you know, that's just more my style. But I'm usually pretty, you know, cool-headed. But this time, I actually had a really bad run before my fight. I ended up, because I went to the UFC retreat. Mm-hmm. That was in Vegas, and I was in
Don't tell us
Thailand.
Chris Cyborg attacked you.
No, she didn't. Luckily. No. So I was in Thailand before that. So I was done a lot of traveling in like this 2 weeks, and I come back, and literally as soon as I got off the plane, there was straight away I just started getting sick. And then the last 2 weeks before my fight, I've just been crook, one after another. I end up getting don't know if I should even say this is, I pretty much told him, obviously everyone knew I was sick, but I ended up getting a bad staph infection the week before the fight.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's another thing. So I was on antibiotics all week. I just finished my antibiotics the day before the weigh-in. And, yeah, so that's why I had a bad run. Like I've probably done 50% of what I usually would train in the last 2 weeks or something. I had a lot of days off, like trying to recover. And it was just, it was a pretty bad run. So talking about how I was feeling going into this fight, I was probably more nervous than I was in my first fight, just knowing that, you know, I wasn't fully prepared like how I usually am. And, you know, is there antibiotics going to affect me, which they have affected me in the past. Like I remember feeling, you know, pretty run down with antibiotics and being crook and just everything. And then I even got sick the night before the fight. Like we end up, man, like it was just bad weather. It was pretty cold down there, and I was coughing all night and woke up and I was like, man, I don't feel good. Wow. And I was like, man, this is a bad run. But I was trying to stay positive, you know what I mean? Like I really, you know, I was even like sort of with my coaches, I was like putting on acts like, you know, like I was that hyped up still and just trying to be normal. I didn't want them to know that something was up. Well, they knew about my infections and that I was sick and all that, obviously, but that, you know, and my coach heard me coughing the night before, so he knew I was coughing, but I was just playing it off. And so, yeah, man, I felt terrible fight day. Like I felt so different to usual, but to go out there and still go 3 rounds, win all 3 rounds, and, you know, people were, you know, saying how good of a performance it was, and just knowing that I could still go out there with some of these guys and do that. It's now, it gives me so much confidence, you know what I mean? I can't wait till the next one. Imagine me at 100%.
Yeah, I think it makes the win so much more impressive knowing everything that you went through. I'm just wondering, why didn't you withdraw from the fight? Did the thought ever cross your mind? Why did you, you know, obviously fighters are extremely tough and there's a lot of line, but what went through your mind, and did you think about withdrawing at any moment?
Look, it always plays like, man, am I going to have to, you know, like, you know, I was just talking to people and, you know, what am I going to do? You know, how have they fought with the antibiotics before, and, you know, is it going to affect their weight cut? But I was like telling my coach and telling, you know, the wife, I go, I'm fighting. I don't care. I have to fight. So I just need to find out the best way. So I obviously can't go over there with I can't fight with a staph infection. So I need to make sure it's gone before then. So I end up getting rid of that. I knew that would be gone. So I didn't, you know, really run that through the UFC because I knew it was gone. But it's just, yeah, man, it was just bloody, I don't know how. I wouldn't say that. You know, I never really thought that I was going to give the fight up. I couldn't. You know, I missed out on a fight earlier this year, and I was like, I have to get in there. I literally have to get in there. So I end up just finding ways around everything, and then yeah. So, but I mean, like I said, so I was already like, you know, before the fight thinking to myself, if I pull this off, man, you know, this is going to be unreal feeling, you know what I mean? And yes, I was already thinking of speeches in my head, like thinking, oh yeah, you know, tell everyone I felt run down, I still got the knockout, I'm happy with that, you know. But so it was, you know, it's crazy. But I mean, now I look at it and I think it's going to be very, very good for me in the future, just knowing that, as bad as it was, I can still go out there and perform. So if I get crook another time, I don't mind having days off. I'll make sure I recover and I won't try and push through things which get you more sick, which is what was happening. So I'll definitely be a lot smarter and better with my approach, especially if I'm getting crook close to a fight, etc.
And I mean, let's talk about the fight, because it was a great fight. You had Hirota and dropped him in the first round. Were you surprised by his toughness and that he was able to hang in there?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I knew he was going to be tough. Like, you watch his fights, he gets hit and he's never been finished. So he's never been finished before. Not finished. He's never been knocked out before. So I knew he was going to be tough, but I thought I'd still finish him. Especially me being sick, I'm like, I need to get the knockout. I don't want to go 3 rounds. I don't know if I can do it. So I was like, I've got to knock him down. If I get him hurt, I'm going to, go through. But because I was crook as well, when I had him hurt and I got him down, I was trying to finish, and then that opportunity sort of left me because he done well to really suck his head a little bit closer to the body, so I couldn't really get them elbows going. And then I was like, oh man, I don't want to. Usually I'll just be persistent. I'll jam his head back to the floor and then just come back with bombs, but I didn't want to wear out. So I had to play it a bit more safe and just purely knowing that I could burn out at any second. So I think that really played a factor in me getting the finish. But take nothing away from him. He's got a hell of a chin. I hit him with some big shots, dropping him, and he just kept going. Them spinning elbows, but some of them landing clean and brushed it off like it was nothing.
That was an amazing fight. And during it, the commentators mentioned how you weren't really a huge featherweight, and you've said to us before that you'd like to ideally drop down to bantamweight. Has there been any talks between yourself and the UFC about you potentially doing that?
I don't think so. Nowadays, when I first originally said that, I thought I probably could do it, but I mean, it's going to be a really big cut. And nowadays, everyone's just doing so good in their natural weight classes. You're seeing people that have been, doing these big cuts, and then, look at Robert Whittaker, even Dan Hooker, like going to lightweight, and, what a performance, So things like that. So it makes me think, that's sort of gone. The big weight cutting days are sort of gone. And I might not be a big featherweight height-wise, but I guarantee when I go into that octagon, I'm just as heavy, if not heavier, than most of the featherweights. And I feel very strong for featherweight. And again, even me being crook, even in a lot of the, while we're in the clinch and all that sort of stuff, I wasn't committing to nothing. I didn't want to burn out. So that's why, looks like he was doing well in the clinch, but I felt so much stronger than him. I just wasn't, really pursuing the clinch too much. So I'd just break off with spinning elbows and go back to standing and then just try and pick some shots.
Talk to us a little bit about that knockout power. I mean, you're known for it. It's unbelievable the way you're able to just stop opponents. Me and Casper were talking about it, and we thought maybe it's something that comes from your days playing rugby, a strong core and being a bit heavier and dropping down. But is it something that you've always had, that kind of power in your hands?
Yeah, I guess, it's always been, I've always had heavy hands. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was from the wrestling days and maybe genetics. I don't know. With my family and my dad and brothers, we're all pretty strong. And we all got a good right hand punch. So maybe it's genetics as well. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But it's even maybe my build. Being so short and stocky, and like you said with the core, maybe it's just got something to do with that. But put it this way, even though Hirota took him well, I still believe I can finish anyone in the division with one of them punches.
And just quickly, I'm just curious, Alex, did you ever get into fights back in your rugby days? Obviously, you were taking professional fights when you were playing rugby. I know you're a nice guy, but did you ever have any sort of fights on the field? Any funny, crazy stories you can tell us?
Yeah, I've definitely been in fights. I've always looked, maybe in the European and that, I've always looked older than I am. Mm-hmm. So I've always people just pick me for some reason. Like, I'm the type of guy, I'm nice. I try and stay out of trouble, but if it comes to me, I'm not going to back down as well. You know what I mean? So that's how I've sort of always been. And my dad, ever since I was young, my dad's always told me, if you feel like this is when I was younger, I wouldn't do that now. But he was like, if you're ever feeling danger and you feel like, this person's going to hurt you or going to try and punch you, you throw the first punch. That's what my dad used to tell me. So sometimes you get put in that position, and that might happen. But I mean, nowadays obviously I can't do that sort of stuff, so I don't go out anyway. But I don't ever really run into dramas like that. But yeah, I've definitely had fights. Football fights, we've had some big football fights. I've actually, I remember getting one. I remember backing up 1 year, so I'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
I was stepping up a year. So that whole year we stepped up. Like we didn't have a 16 side, so we played under 17s, I think. Oh, no. We didn't have a 17, so we played under 18s. And we were already stepping up, and our whole team was. And then we had guys from the grade below us, like under 15, step up to help us because we didn't have many players. And they were sort of trying to bully us. They were smashing us, and then they were like trying to get like some of the young kids to run at them and stuff like that. And then I'm like, no, I'll run at you, sort of thing. So I ran at him, and they done a decent tackle, wasn't too good. And he starts yelling in my face, and then we grabbed each other and gave a couple of little shoves. And next minute I was on, and then I end up, I'm not too proud of it, but I end up giving him a couple of good ones and end up doing a bit of damage and got sent off. So it's not fun, even though it's a fun little story now to tell. But you still look at it and you think, I could have avoided that, but. I guess that's sport.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely sport. Memories of me getting soccer kicked in the head playing AFL here in Victoria. I mean, it's just a part of. I didn't. It's not funny to me even now when I think about it. But yeah, funny. Me yelling on a muddy hill at a guy and almost slipping over while he's on the bench. My girlfriend sitting there with her hands over her face. Anyway, let's talk about what you said after the fight because. You consider yourself a nice guy and that you want to be fed the bad guys and that it's time for good guys to make some money. Tell us a little bit about what exactly you meant by that.
Well, I just mean like everyone, you know what I mean? Like even to me, like it's sort of I take it sort of personal a little bit as well. Like a lot of people sit there and you probably hear it all the time. Everyone's like, oh, no, yeah, you need to call someone out. You need to, give people shit. And rah, rah, rah. But everyone's doing that. Literally everyone is going out there trying to, just call people out, trying to be the bad guy. And I just saw, you know what? That's not me. I'll go, fine. You just want to play the bad guys? I'll play the good guy. No one's playing the good guy. So I'm like, all right, I'll play the good guy. If you want to, go out calling people out and be the bad guy, I can be the real life hero and take them all out and take the division out. Be the good guy. Now, that's what I was saying. That's what I wanted to get the knockout, and I was going to get the knockout, say put on a real big performance and then say, feed me these bad boys and feed me the 50 G's while you're at it. But, it didn't go that way. Like I said, I was a big crook, but I mean, I thought, it could be a potential fight of the night or something like that. So I was like, I still asked for the 50 G's. I think everyone's asking for the 50 G's nowadays.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, I pride myself on being a nice guy. You know what I mean? Like I get along with everyone. I'm that guy that apologizes halfway through a fight to the referee and gets taken down. I don't know if you've seen that on my debut. But that's exactly what happened. I was on top of Yusuke Yachi throwing bombs, and then I end up like leaning forward and put my hand on the cage, and then the ref's like, "Watch the fence, Alex." I look at him, I go, "Sorry, mate," and then that's when he actually took me down.
Wow.
So I don't know. You didn't see that one.
We were there live, but we actually didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So it's
Did you hear that one? Yeah.
It's good because now we know, and now everybody else knows whenever they rewatch the fight. And I'm just trying to sort of understand your mentality, just sort of from your mind. What exactly is it that puts you off about trash talk? Is it fair to say that we'll never see you trash talking in the UFC?
No. I wouldn't say no trash talk. Like, you know what I mean? Obviously, people are going to have their bites, and I'm going to be defensive. I'm still going to, but I'm not going to just. Look, I'll be lying if I said I'm not going to trash talk and that. Like, you're still going to see your fair share of me, saying stuff to people. But, I mean, I'm a nice guy, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try and shake his hand. If he tries to mean mug me and that, I'll still try and shake his hand. I'll laugh in his face if he wants. But come fight time, I'm going to, take his head off either way so he can talk whatever he wants. But, like I said, I'm going to play the good guy. Good guys talk back, so I'm allowed to do my own sort of trash talk. I'll let them start the argument though.
And speaking of good guys, I mean, there's a few good guys in the featherweight division. I mean, the biggest bad guy that I guess we're all talking about is Conor McGregor, and he's gone from the division. What are your thoughts of the landscape of the division now? Obviously, you've got a new champion in Max Holloway. Some uncertainties there with Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar looking to possibly fight him next. But apart from that, The division kind of looks pretty wide open. What are your thoughts on the state of it at the moment?
Yeah, I think people just need to realise that Conor's definitely not going back to 145. That's not going to happen. I can guarantee that. And if it does, yeah, cool. But, I mean, that's not going to happen. So right now, Max Holloway's a champ, and that's what everyone needs to sort of focus on now. But, yeah, you're right. There's obviously you've got Frankie Edgar still up there, yeah, Rodriguez and things like that. But mentioning them, a couple of names, they seem like good guys. So I don't know. I don't know what my next play is. Too many good guys up there, but I'm sure there's bad guys. There's a couple that I was actually. Well, there was one that I was meant to fight in Canada, and because I usually knew about that fight that ended up falling through. Mm-hmm. I had 3 opponents changed in like 3 days or 1 week for some reason. I don't know, but they just kept changing, and one of them was Andre Fili. And so I was, he's a decent name as well, you know what I mean? So respect to the guy. I was like, looking forward to that fight. I was thinking, that's a good, there'll be eyes on him. So I would love that. But for some reason, that didn't happen. But, I don't know if he plays the bad guy or not. But, I mean, if he does, then I guess we could make something like that happen. But I don't know, man. To be honest with you, hopefully someone calls me out. Like I said, I want them to make the first move, and then I can sort of bite back.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody will be calling you out soon. Alex, we appreciate the time you're giving us, so we'll let you go in just a moment. Just wondering, in terms of timeline, you stated that you want another couple of fights this year. At this rate, you're sort of going to climb the rankings pretty quickly. Is that your goal? Are you looking to sort of get that title shot as quick as possible, or are you sort of happy to constantly, hone your skills regardless of where the fight puts you in the divisions? And when are you looking to fight next? And also, do you want to sort of have another local fight, or do you want to get some new fans in other demographics and maybe fight overseas?
I'll just fight anywhere. Definitely fight local as well. I want, as you say, I want to fight as regular as possible. So as long as the doctors go, yeah, you can fight in 6 weeks, I'll fight in 6 weeks. Obviously, I can't spar right now, but I can definitely stay in shape. I can definitely work, some techniques and all that. So I won't be stopping the training. And if there's a matchup available, I'll definitely snatch up whatever I can get. And like I said, I need to shoot through these ranks, and to do so, I need to fight. And yeah, so bring them on. Or whatever fights we do. Like, I'd love to fight overseas as well, but let's see what they throw at me.
Mm-hmm. And ideally, if we're looking at the amounts of fights for the rest of 2017, what's a number that makes you feel good?
I want another 2. I wanted at least 3 a year. In featherweight division, like I said, it's a stacked division. They can't promise you so many fights. But I mean, if I could get, if I fought in February and then I fight, supposedly there's talks of this November card in Sydney. That would have been fine. I would have been happy with that. But missing out on that February fight really makes me want to fight a couple of times before the end of the year. So, yeah, I'll definitely, give me another 2.
All right, well, there you guys go. He is the nice guy in the featherweight division. If anybody's listening, call him out. It's time for him to get some more fights in 2017. And make sure to follow him on Twitter at Alex Volkanovski. Alex, we really appreciate the time. Any messages to your fans around the world? I know there's a lot in the US after the fights this past weekend.
Thanks for the support. And like I said, if you liked what you saw on the weekend, expect bigger and better things, because I can definitely do better than that. And don't be too thrown off with the whole not calling out someone. Like, I'm the good guy, but, comes a time where you might have to offer, ask someone out. Maybe I can do that very respectfully, but I might have to call someone out very soon.
There you go. Awesome.
So stay tuned.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is one of the most well-known and beloved heavyweights of all time. Known for his crushing right hand and granite chin, he is the Ultimate Fighter Season 10 winner, a former IFL champion, a whopping 4-time Knockout of the Night winner, and the latest huge signing to Bellator's ever-growing roster. He is Roy Big Country Nelson. Roy, welcome to the program. How are you today?
I appreciate being on.
Oh, the pleasure's all ours, Roy. It's great to have you on the show. Now, we saw you had a pretty fun night when you went and watched the Rough Night movie. You had a bit of a sash on that said lethally horny on it. Was it as wild a night as we thought it was? Because it looked pretty crazy from the photo that you put up on Instagram.
Yeah, no, it was actually a fun night. My wife was invited to go to this premiere, so I said, and she wanted me to come, so we had a good girls' night out.
Very nice, very nice. We love it when we're invited to girls' nights out. Now, you signing with Bellator, Roy, really came out of nowhere and took everybody by surprise. How long had these negotiations and talks been going on for, and when did they start?
Pretty much as soon as we found out we could do something, we made things happen. That's just how that's how MMA works. Anything can happen.
When would you say that was? Because the signing only happened a few weeks ago. Was it the last few months? When did you sort of first figure out that you could sort of have this period where you could talk to Bellator and other companies?
Literally a few weeks ago. So, like, as soon as I signed with Bellator, we'll say maybe an hour or a few minutes.
Wow.
I mean, down to the second.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because obviously huge career in the UFC, but on the side, while you were in the UFC, were you keeping an eye on Bellator and what they were doing over there in the organization and sort of thinking about one day maybe that being the next home for you?
Yeah, no, for myself, I always wanted to stay with the UFC, but then, UFC kind of went to a whole different, marketing strategy, and they weren't about fighting anymore, and a whole bunch of and there's nothing been said bad about Scott Coker, and I really wanted to work with Scott Coker. Actually, quite a few friends always praise Scott Coker, and I'm always about working for a guy that wants to do good for our sport.
Just on that, I know that while in the UFC, you had a couple of fights there where you felt like you had to market your fights yourself because the word wasn't really going out about them through the UFC. Especially your last fight, it seemed like a lot of fans didn't really know about it happening until the event kind of went down. And they're like, oh, Roy Nelson's on the card. And I know we've spoken to a few fighters about that. Lorenz Larkin was on the show last week and spoke about the lack of marketing and promotion of his fight. Was that sort of one of the things that was frustrating to you, that you had to sort of take things into your own hands and get the word out about your latest sort of last couple of fights because the UFC sort of chose not to do that?
Yeah, no, like my biggest thing with if I was making all the we'll say if I was like Mayweather and I was making all the profit for doing the promotion, I would have no problem being able to market myself and put butts in the seat. And, I mean, I already do butts in the seat, but I would have no problem selling millions of pay-per-view if marketing's right behind me.
So when it sort of came down to figuring things out, who reached out to who? Did you contact Scott, or was he pretty quick to contact you? Because Bellator, obviously, in this period where they're trying to sign all the big names.
Yeah, no, like with myself, with Scott, like the first time I ever wanted to work with Scott was actually when they had the Grand Prix in Strikeforce. Because I've always stayed away from the UFC for the longest time, where I went to Affliction and Elite XC, and then I was going to try to join Strikeforce just because that's where all the heavyweights were. And I tried to fight every heavyweight that I possibly could in the UFC and try to get rematches, and that never, came true. So if I can't get a rematch and nobody wants to fight me, then it's time to, move forward.
Yeah, for sure. And just curious, how close did you sort of come to working with Scott before and sort of being a part of Strikeforce? Because obviously the UFC fans, they really only got a taste of you after your IFL career through The Ultimate Fighter. Was there a moment where you almost didn't get into Tough and maybe you went with Scott instead?
No, if I would have, if Scott at the time, if Coker would have just, I think we did have a little lack of communication. I would have probably been, in Strikeforce, but for the most part, it was. I think it was just a timing thing. I think they were at one section, and then I was at another section in my life, and then that's how I joined Ultimate Fighter. And then 8 years later, and now I'm back reunited, and we're gonna make things great things happen.
Of course, yeah, and people are really excited to see you in Bellator. A lot of people excited to see who you're going to fight next. Just quickly on that relationship with Scott, we know a lot of fighters love working with him. Lorenz was talking last week about dealing with Scott directly in terms of business. But if you had to sort of see the big difference between dealing with Dana White and Scott Coker and those two relationships, what's the biggest difference for you there?
I guess the easiest thing is I would just say is understanding and communication. I think those are probably the easiest. If I can text Scott or pick up the phone and call Scott picks up, then I'm happy.
Now that it's sort of in the past, how would you sort of look back on and reflect on your UFC career?
You know what? I really don't. I don't look back. I look forward. I mean, I'm waiting for if anybody wants to come fight me and they think that they're a better fighter, they're more than happy to come over to Bellator and we can get it on again. Because I'm tired of chasing them. Now they can come chase me. But I already know that anybody that's ever fought me before will never want to fight me again.
Certainly. And I mean, we want to get to that and talk about some of these potential matchups. One of the exciting things for fans is they'll get to see you and meet you and take photos with you on June 24th at Madison Square Garden in New York, just prior to Bellator 180. This is a bit of a fun question. We're just curious, in all of your years, what's the craziest thing a fan has sort of ever asked you to sign? Because we imagine there's going to be some interesting requests when it comes down to the 24th.
I think the weirdest one for me was with my wife standing right there, a female asked me to sign her boob.
Oh, wow.
That was probably the weirdest. But the funny part was that she had no boob. That's even what made it worse.
I feel like that's the kind of thing, like, if you got a wife or girlfriend, like, they don't really get too intimidated by that. I'm just curious, what was your wife's reaction as she was standing there watching you sign, a pair of boobs or non-boobs?
She said you might want to sign on her bra instead.
Let's talk about Bellator for just a second. I mean, not just a second. There's a lot to talk about here and a lot of unpack. Looking at Bellator 180, what do you think of the event so far and Bellator's debut at Madison Square Garden? Because Bellator 180 and Bellator NYC, a lot of people are saying this is the biggest MMA card of 2017.
Yeah, no, it's from top to bottom. I mean, you got Juan versus Chael, you got Fedor versus Matt. The best part is free on Spike. You got Ryan Bader versus Bill Davis for the championship. I mean, there's so many good fights on that card. I was actually talking to Chael today, and he was just talking about the fights that are on it. He's looking forward to, and I'm excited to watch his fight.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is there one fight particular that you're looking forward to more than the most? Because, I mean, being a heavyweight, you would think Fedor Emelianenko and Matt Mitrione, but are you maybe leaning towards Chael Wanderlei because of the build-up?
I mean, I guess it's the question of fights that's been, they were trying to make that in the UFC, and now Bellator actually got it finally done.
What do you think of that matchup? Who do you think sort of wins between Fedor Emelianenko and Matt Mitrione, and how do you think that fight might play out?
I think it all really depends on gameplay. Fedor just comes out and being, the Tasmanian devil that he is, and explosive. I think Matt has I think it'll be a short night for Fedor. But if Matt's able to, create distance and able to pick him apart, then I see it in Matt. So it's actually a fun fight to watch.
It's going to be an intriguing one. For a long time, Fedor was the man to beat a heavyweight and seen as the greatest of all time in the division. How interested would you be in facing him next?
For myself, it'd be awesome because if I have a chance to beat Fedor and beat Fedor, I'll be the only man to beat Fedor, Krokop, and Big Knob.
Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing list there. I mean, you'll be there already promoting the fact that you're with Bellator. Is there any chance you get in the cage afterwards and maybe even challenge the winner of the fight?
I think the fans might just request that, so it's definitely a possibility.
You gotta love it when you don't really even have to do much in that sense. The fight may even be made because the fans demand it. Just curious, Roy, what is the goal for you in Bellator? Are you sort of looking to become the Bellator heavyweight champion and hold a world title? Or are you just looking to sort of have fun fights and take fights that interest you these days?
For me, I want to fight everybody and anybody. That's the one thing I always try to do in the UFC, but I was actually held back quite a bit over there. So for me, the one thing I like about Bellator is they're more old school thinking of like if they put a fight in front of you, you just take it.
It's interesting. When you say you were held back quite a bit, what do you mean in terms of matchmaking? Were there certain fights that you wanted that you weren't able to get in the UFC?
Yeah, if I have more wins than Cain Velasquez in the last 4 years, I think there's a problem if the guy only fights the same guy like 4 times.
Yeah, I mean, Cain's obviously had a lot of issues. Just curious, what were some of the fights that you requested back in the UFC that never sort of, came to fruition?
I mean, you name any fighter that I wanted to fight or refight. I mean, how many times has everybody gotten rematches? That's the thing. It's like I'm kind of like a typical, I guess, professional athlete where you compete and you keep competing, and you're gonna have some wins, you're gonna have some losses, but at the end of the day, I'll have more wins than what my opponent will if we fight more than one.
The interesting thing about you, Roy, is you've got a very distinctive look and sort of a brand about yourself which is one of the reasons why fans loved watching you. But, over and over when you were in the UFC, it seemed like Dana White wasn't a very big fan of possibly, the way you were marketing yourself or the way you looked. In the Ultimate Fighter, you always spoke about the belly rub and he wasn't a big fan of it. Do you feel like the UFC kind of missed the boat in a lot of ways by not really embracing who you were or who you are and as an athlete and as a personality?
I think definitely if people just don't get Roy Nelson or the whole thing, but the one thing is Bellator does, so that's all that matters. As long as Bellator does, and we're going forward, and you know what, the next thing you know is belly rub is going to be everywhere.
I mean, you mentioned that. It's a funny question, but I want to ask it because, we've been watching you and fans of yours for a really long time. But in your mind, who is Roy Nelson?
Roy Nelson is just, that all-American guy that, puts his pants on just like anybody else. He just goes out and fights anybody. And at the end of the day, we'll put on a show for the fans.
Have you spoken much to Scott Coker about any particular ideas that you have, any sort of fun, creative things that you want to sort of bring to Bellator? I'm wondering, sort of, you're a very humble guy, but what do you think that you bring to Bellator and their brand? Because I think a lot of fans will sort of agree that you bring a lot.
The one thing that I love about Bellator is how Viacom owns them and their bike, so it's more of a cross-branding opportunity versus a lot of the other organizations out there. Because with Spike, you got all the way from, from like bar rescue to cops to whatever things that people are really interested in. They actually show it. I mean, they have lip sync battle. I mean, they have a whole bunch of different stuff that cross promotes to what Roy Nelson is. Like, I mean, I'll get up there and I'll act like I'm singing Diana Ross for you.
So, yeah, that was going to be my next question. I know you're a fighter and you're a guy that goes in there and knocks people out, but are you sort of interested in doing that, appearing on all those other programs, like you mentioned, maybe lip sync battle or some kind of cop show? Are you interested in doing that kind of cross promotion? Yeah,
always. The one thing that I'm really good at is basically promotion, because that's all I had to do for the last 15 years.
Right, I gotta say, man, you sound kind of rejuvenated and a little bit excited while we're talking to you, because it kind of feels like a new chapter in your career. Do you feel like going over to Bellator in a lot of ways has made you a little bit more excited about the sport and your fighting career again?
Yeah, no, definitely. The one thing though is I'm getting skinnier and stuff, and everybody keeps asking what I've been doing. I go, I just stopped stress eating.
Were you? I mean, it sounds like such a typical Roy Nelson, like deadpan kind of humor, but were you really stress eating over the last few years?
Of course. I mean, have you seen, I used to have a young face when I got in the UFC. Now I have an old face. It's like being a president.
So who knows? Fans may see a fitter and skinnier than ever Roy Nelson. Roy, we were talking about Fedor before. We just want to quickly get your thoughts on something that happened this past weekend with Derrick Lewis potentially retiring from the UFC after his loss to Mark Hunt. I mean, a lot of fans kind of not sure what to think of it all. What were your thoughts when you saw what he said at the end of the fight and his sort of intentions to not fight again?
Good for him. That's what he wanted to do. I mean, me personally, I thought I should have retired him when they didn't have a chance to, get the rematch for that.
That's it. So that was sort of another rematch that you wanted. I'm wondering, at this point, it sounds like you're rejuvenated, but a lot of these guys that we sort of grew up watching and fans grew up watching, guys like, Mark Hunt sort of alluded to maybe being around the corner from retirement. Derrick Lewis might not come back. Have you sort of thought about how much longer you like to fight for? Sounds like you're rejuvenated, but is there sort of a timeline that you want to sort of, I guess, finish by?
For myself, as long as I'm still competitive, that's all I care about. I mean, I could be like Randy Couture, and win a championship at 43. I mean, who knows? I might fight for the belt by the end of December. one of those things I haven't even really thought about. I just want to get out there and fight. That's the one thing that I love to do, and put on a show for the fans.
And I mean, on that, what is your time frame? When will you be ready to step in and have your first Bellator fight? Have you guys discussed that yet? Are you waiting to see what happens at Bellator NYC before anything gets put down on paper? Where are you at right now?
Well, I'll be in Madison Square Garden on June 24th, so maybe that day. I don't know.
I'm curious, Roy, we appreciate the time you're giving us. We're going to let you go in just a moment. Just a couple more questions. I've always wanted to ask you this. You did an interview with MMA Junkie recently where you said that you hate fighting, but you love the sport of MMA. Can you explain what exactly you meant by that? What exactly do you hate by fighting, and how you're able to sort of love it enough to do it as a career?
Well, see, like fighting and confrontation, I'm not a big fighting confrontation type of guy. I look at this as definitely like a sport of like playing basketball, but also a fight. So you go out there and, you go out and see who's the best man for, that right there, for the fight. But at the end of the day, I just, it's basically two men going in there and just, if time runs out, it's the guy that's, my hand's always going to be raised at the end.
Well, as we let you go, Roy, and we really appreciated the time. In this time of fighting, I mean, fighters are more eager than ever to test the free agent market and explore their options. You've done it, and it looks like so far it's really working out. What's your message and advice to any fighters that are listening to this right now about if they're considering what to do next, if they're in the UFC and they're unhappy? What's your advice to them? What's your message?
I think if you're unhappy anywhere, you're more than happy to just contact me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Roy Nelson MMA. That's probably the easiest way if you want. I'll give you straight answers all day long. But I have a question for you.
What is the question?
I have a couple of fans from Australia. They want to know what channel is Bellator on down there?
Well, that's the unfortunate thing. We don't have Bellator. It used to be on 1HD, and unfortunately, it's very behind. So unfortunately, whoever's running the TV here, they're not doing a good enough job. But there are obviously ways for people in Australia to still watch Bellator.
Well, you know what? I'll have a talk with Scott next week and we'll talk about that and get that handled for you guys.
We would, you know what? If you could be that guy, if you could be the man, we would absolutely love that, because all day long we're getting bombarded with people asking us, how can we watch Bellator? How are you guys watching Bellator? So if you could take care of that for us, Roy, that would be amazing. And in the meantime, guys, like Roy mentioned, make sure to follow him on Twitter at Roy Nelson MMA. And if you are a fan going to Bellator NYC and you want to meet Roy as well as Rory McDonald, make sure to go to the meet and greet. It is at Madison Square Garden, the Concourse, 4 Pennsylvania Plaza, New York, Saturday, June 24th from 5:30 till 7:30. It is for Bellator NYC ticket holders. And Big Country and Roy Nelson will be there, so it'll be a great time. Roy, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
No problem, but I'm going to talk to Scott and make sure that happens.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thanks so much, Roy.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys, our next guest is known for his legendary MMA career, a pioneer in the sport. He is a former UFC light heavyweight champion, UFC Hall of Famer, and has had some memorable moments in his Bellator run. He now joins us back on the program, the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
Right on, guys. Thank you so much for having me on the show again.
As always, it's always a pleasure. Now, Tito, we noticed you celebrated your coach Jason Perillo's birthday over the weekend. Tell us, how were the celebrations? What did you guys do, and how did you guys celebrate?
It was actually, I met him at one of the bars that are close to his house. We just had a few coldies, get to enjoy some beers. Me and his girlfriend and my girlfriend, we just hung out as couples and just enjoyed ourselves. So it was a good day.
Yeah, we love having Jason on the show, by the way. He's such a great guy. And sometimes it feels like the MMA community underrates his work, working with guys like you, BJ Penn, Michael Bisping, Chris Cyborg. I mean, what is it about him that makes him such an amazing coach?
I think it's just the positivity that he gives for the whole camp. I mean, not only a friend, but just the coaching style he uses. And, of course, he takes apart the opponent you're fighting, and he finds their mistakes, and we work on it during training, or at least I formally do. And now the rest of the people is Michael Bisping, Chris Cyborg, and other up-and-coming fighters that go to Ruka do the same thing. I mean, he just brings the best out of us. And he brought the best out of me through my career, through the end of my career.
That's very true. He's very personable. Every time we get him on the phone, he makes you feel very special. That Jason. Other than hanging out with him and having drinks with him, talk to us about retirement life. What have you been up to since the final fight, the big win against Chael Sonnen?
I thought the retired life would be enjoying margaritas on the beach and little cool umbrellas on it.
It's not?
But no, it's called the working life.
Oh.
You still got to work. You got to work to pay bills. You still got to work. I don't know. It lasted for about two months, and I got bored. So I kind of realized that for people who are wealthy, to have that money, they have to have 5 resources coming in every month, and I'm up to 4 already. So I'm looking for my 5th resource. It's just I'm a worker. I'm a workaholic. I like to work. I like to bust my butt for the future of my children and the future of their kids. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw on Twitter, you're a very, very busy man. We see you buying up a bunch of cars. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Tell us a little bit about some of these new ventures that you've got going on. What are a couple of them that have you most excited?
Well, I think taking 22nd out of 456 in Panama in the poker World Championship for poker stars was pretty amazing. But then I get an email. This is a true story. I get an email as I'm playing poker, and I'm down to the last, I think, 4 tables, and I get an email from my agent telling me that Tyler Perry wanted me to shoot a film with him.
Wow.
So Medea 2, Boo 2 is coming out in October, and I got one of the main parts, co-star with him as one of his best friends. We play a joke on our daughters. It's a little bit of drama with comedic stuff through it, but it was exciting. I had to go all in as I got an email from my agent in poker, and I was ace queen, and this Russian guy who was one of the stack leaders in the tournament, I ended up go all in, and he goes, "Oh, I've been watching you for a while. I don't think you have it." He turns it over. He has king, I think it was king jack. I had ace queen. I was like, please no ace, because I wanted to go all in to leave because I wanted to shoot this movie with Tyler Perry.
Yeah.
So on the flop turns over ace. I was like, oh man, I'm not going anywhere time soon. And I couldn't wait till the next day because I had to get my flight the next day. So I go on the next 10, all in, 10-5, offsuit, which I would never do that. And he called me again. I couldn't believe he called me again. He took me down. But, I had to go all in just so I could be on the next plane flight to Atlanta and shoot the film with Tyler Perry, which I learned a lot from. That and doing wholesale retail cars, just, like I said, I have these different resources coming in, managing Chris Cyborg. I mean, there's so many things that I do and trying to make time with my kids also. With their coaching for wrestling, it becomes tough. But I'm able to spread myself thin enough where I'm having enough time to do all of it.
Wow, there's a lot going on there. And did you mention to this Russian guy that, hey, you didn't really get me, I'm trying to get out to do a movie, or did you let him have his moment in the sun? Because you're a good man. You're the people's champion.
I think I did when I flipped over the ace queen. I think that the next time that's why he did call me. But it was good. I was able to make $16,000 and a great time in Panama. My kids came along with me. Poker Stars treated us, like no other, as they always do. It was a good trip, but then I ended up, they went home, and I went to Atlanta and shot for 5 days. We shot the whole Boo movie, and I think 6 days they finished it.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm just wondering, did you have to do any kind of crazy preparations? Was this was this like Christian Bale sort of preparing for The Machinist, where you had to sort of have a completely different look, or were you sort of playing more or less yourself? You could sort of keep on the size and everything.
No, I was pretty much just playing his best friend in college, who was a father of a daughter. His daughter was my daughter's best friend, and we're trying to play a joke on them. They're going to college, and they want to go up to the lake, and his daughter's birthday was at the time, and they lied to us, and we ended up playing a joke on them. People got to see it when it comes out. Of course, it's Medea Boo 2. It should be out right in October, I believe. But it was a great experience with Tyler Perry. The guy's an amazing producer, director, actor. He did everything. I mean, like I say, we shot pretty much about 30 pages a day. And anybody's in the film industry, that's super, super, super fast. I mean, he's doing directing and production, right there. And acting. And he plays 3 different characters. It's amazing to watch this guy work. I learned so much from it.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. And, you know, we used to love seeing all your different cameos back in the day and all the different movies. So it's great to see you back at it. I mean, you know, I know you mentioned that you got a little bit bored during your retirement. A lot of people and a lot of fans in the community, in the MMA community, thought you may have actually been on your way back to having one more fight. Did you at all have the itch to come back and fight again, or was that not even a thought in your mind?
Not even a thought in my mind. I'm still like dying from neck pain. I have to get neck surgery here, and I was supposed to get it a month and a half ago, and I just insurance got denied, so I got to wait. They got to appeal it, and after they appeal it, then I have to go through back and forth, the paperwork. They make you jump through fire hoops to get the surgery done, and I just I don't know, man. I can't stand the pain, but I have to wait to get the surgery. So fighting hasn't even been an idea. Getting in the gym and training hasn't even been an idea. I mean, I haven't gotten into the gym since right before the fight. I think that's the last time. The last time I did anything strenuous like that was fighting Chael Sonnen.
Wow. And that's crazy, because for you, that's probably a very, very long time to sort of not be active and be away from the gym. We have to ask, though, while we're sort of talking about fighting, there's been a bit of back and forth between you and Chuck Liddell recently. It all started when there was this picture of you guys posted Chuck Liddell's Instagram with the caption, "Why not?" Tell us, how did this picture even come about? What happened?
Well, I was at a poker event with Poker Stars, and he was at the same event also playing. And the media wanted to take a face-off picture, and I said, cool. And then we started walking towards the back. So let's do another face-off picture. Let me post it. And I was like, all right, cool. I mean, you know it's not going to happen. I mean, why? I mean, but I guess he just wanted to get some play out of it, which he did. That night, I reposted, why not? And, I said, why not? I just I set it on emotions. I probably shouldn't have did what I reposted. But at that time, I had a couple drinks in me, and the bad boy comes out every once in a while. I just don't plan on fighting. I don't plan on people trying to force me to fight. I have to get a neck surgery. Why would I even think about fighting? Why would I even think about risking myself physically? I mean, I got to take care of kids still. So I probably shouldn't have said what I said on my Twitter. I was saying, do you need money? I'll lend it to you. I probably shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have posted the photo or the video of him in Texas. But like I say, I did it all on emotions. I thought it was funny at the time, and I apologized after. And it's behind me now. But like I said, Chuck wanted to get some play out of it. He did. I'm too old to be fighting. I'm 42 years old. I'm too old. I'm not a Randy Couture, and I really don't need the cash right now. So I'd rather make money on other means of more mental than the physical side. Being in the gym, 6 days a week, 6 to 8 hours a day is not really what in my idea of working anymore. That's behind me now. It's been 20 years, and I think I've done what I needed to do. And I think I could be Chuck, but still, I don't need to do that anymore. My body can't take it. That's been my biggest enemy through my whole career is my body. So I got to step back and I got to use my brain. That's what I went to college for. So let's go ahead and continue doing that. It's been exciting since.
Yeah, I think it's smart, and it takes a lot to sort of make that transition and sort of be honest with yourself like that. But I'm just wondering, you mentioned Chuck getting some play out of it. He definitely did get some play out of it. Did he mention anything to you during that night? Did he sort of say, like, look, I'm trying to come back? Did he ask you about, hey, would you be interested in fighting? Did he sort of preposition you like that?
No, but he actually that night he didn't. But I know prior he has people reach out to my people saying that we should fight each other again. I left on my own terms. I left when I wanted to leave. I didn't leave because I got knocked out 4 times in a row. I left when I needed to leave. I took the best I possibly could do, and I walked away. And I think I left in a storybook ending. No reason for me to come back and mess anything up and try to push my body beyond it. It needs to go. And like I say, that's been my worst enemy through my career has been my body. But with Chuck, that night he never came up to me and said, let's post it and, let's fight and so forth. He said a couple people came up to him, they would make some big money out of it, and I was just like, I don't want to fight anymore. You know what? It's not even the factor of fighting. I don't want to train anymore. That's what it is. I don't think my body can handle the training. It's just so rigorous on the body. I've been doing it since I've been a sophomore in high school. I've been wrestling, and that's like 50% of my game is wrestling. So it's hard to do. And going on my 4th neck surgery, it's just nothing that interests me. I don't want to have neck surgery after neck surgery where I'm literally fused from C1 all the way down to C7, and then go in the thoracic, which is T level, down to lower lumbar. I don't want that to happen to my spine. And enough surgeries for me. I have one more ahead of me, and I want to be done after that.
Absolutely. You've had more surgeries in one lifetime than anybody should. I'm just curious though. When did Chuck reach out to you, or when did his people reach out to you? Was this when you were still in the UFC, or was this when you were in Bellator? When abouts was it?
It was like right when I was retiring. I think it might have been right after I retired.
So after the Chael fight?
Yeah, I don't have no interest in it. I don't know. Especially after the Chael fight, when I'm sitting with my neck the way it feels. I mean, here in the States, they only give you so much medication to kind of kill the pain for the day, and if not enough medication, I got to suffer for 6 hours of the day just to wait for my next medication to have to kind of dull the pain. So I got to wait until surgery happens, and when that happens, this knife could take it out of my neck. That's how bad it hurts.
Yeah, no, that's horrible. A lot of people sort of confused, Tito, as to what your relationship with Chuck is. I mean, we all saw what happened in Tough when you guys were versing each other. We know, in his book, he's spoken a little bit about not liking you at certain points in his career. But are you guys friends behind the scenes? Were you ever friends? And what's your relationship like really behind the scenes right now? On the side, away from all the social media stuff and the stuff that Chuck was trying to do to try and get this 3rd fight.
Listen, when we first became together, we were managed by the same person. We were Team Punishment. We were the first Team Punishment, me and Chuck Liddell. He would come and stay at my house in Huntington Beach. I'd let him sleep on my couch, and he'd do the same thing when I go to San Luis Obispo. Him try to say that we were never friends and so forth, it was he was buying into what UFC were selling, and that's the whole deal. He didn't care about what money he got paid. He just wanted to fight. That's all. And he wanted to be champion. That's all he cared about. My idea, if we're going to be friends and we're going to fight each other, we're going to make big money. We're going to make, $5 million, $10 million. We're going to make a big chunk of what UFC were making at the time. I think one of the biggest ones they got were over $42 million for our second fight. And we just got maybe, I think, 4% of that, 3% of that, if that. It just didn't make sense to me. And he caved in the very first fight when we fought, and we got paid $150,000 a piece, which is pennies. And for him to give away our friendship for that, we became acquaintance. And when we do see each other, it's, hey, what's up, buddy? And no more than that. That's the way I am towards friends who turn their back on me. It's acquaintance. I'm fine with it. When I'm close to someone, I treat them like family. And I think that's the way it should be. When you become a friend with somebody, it should be like family. If money is involved, and the same thing goes with Quentin Rampage Jackson. We were going to make sure that we made money. We're going to make millions when we fought. Even in Bellator, we're still going to make millions when we fought. And that was the reason why we're going to fight each other. Now, with Chuck was totally different. He didn't care. He was willing to fight no matter what. And it didn't make sense to me. So for him to turn his back on me the way he did, there was always that little grudge towards each other. And nowadays, it's just, hey, what's up, handshake, good to see you too, right on, and no more than that.
I mean, the big difference, I guess, in both of your careers is Chuck had to retire in 2010 while you had the opportunity to keep fighting in Bellator and you had another great run. Even though there is that thing that happened between you two, does a part of you kind of feel bad for how things turned out for Chuck having to retire before the sport kind of really blew up? And then not really having that opportunity to have that extended run that you had, especially when the sport grew to the size that it is?
Yeah, I mean, that happens to fighters. Some guys can fix their problem and move on and get better, take a couple losses, come back. I mean, as I did. I took 5 losses in a row until I came back and did something. It's hard. You look at Ronda Rousey, and she's taking the loss she has, and can she get back and do it? It's hard for a person to do that, but I was always set in my mind that I could achieve anything as long as I set my mind to the right way. But I can't help a person's career if I'm not managing them, and they don't want to listen to me as a friend, as I tried to talk to Chuck a long time ago as a friend, and he wouldn't listen to me. It is what it is, and that's the way it played out. UFC had his back after he retired, so he was getting paid all the way up to last year, and now he's not getting paid anymore. He's kind of realized, what am I going to do now? And That's the way it is. It's too bad. I wish people would listen to other friends who have been through it.
And also, a lot of people in the community sort of wondering if fighting another time is the right thing for Chuck. I mean, he is quite a bit older, and in 2010 when he retired, he wasn't the fighter that he once was. Would you actually want to see Chuck come back and fight again? Because a lot of people are very hesitant about and worried about him getting back in that octagon or in Bellator, for example.
I would be very worried about him. I think that was one of the reasons why Dana pulled him from the UFC to fight in general. I think he needs to look at the history. That's super. I mean, as a friend, that concerns me. I mean, I would be concerned about the person, not only just to see a person fight. We've had our time. We've shined when we needed to shine, and that's why I walked away personally. I shine when I needed to shine. I don't need to hurt myself anymore. I don't need to try to kill myself to prove anybody how bad I truly am, because I know how bad I am. I don't need to show it to anybody, and I hope Chuck understands that himself, how bad he truly is, and he doesn't need to show anybody.
I mean, just finally on Chuck before we move on, I know you mentioned if that third fight happened, you feel like you would have won. I mean, the first two didn't quite go away, but if your neck was healthy enough and for some reason you decided to fight him, how do you think that third fight would play out if it happened today?
I think just my mental side of it now compared to where I was back then, I was a totally different person. Number one was my life wasn't about fighting. It was about taking care of a relationship and taking care of my children that was falling apart. Now it's totally different. My family's completely solid. Amber Miller is my girlfriend that helps with my children. That is, pretty much their mother. Not blood, but just the way she's been here now for the last 4 years, and she's taken the place and made my family super, super happy. Has made me super, super happy, and that's what number one is. My kids happy, me happy. I'm a dangerous person to that. My loss to Liam McGarry was a little mistake that I made, but I could have went 3-0 and be the Bellator world champ and retired. But I made a little mistake, and I didn't. But I did win 3 of those fights of the 4. I just now I'm a different fighter. I think I'm super dangerous, and I think Chuck's chin is very, very weak. Once you get knocked out, it gets easier and easier each time. But that's just my opinion. I just think, like I say, I'm a different fighter. I'm a different person in general. I'm not the same person I was from 2007 to 2013. I changed completely in general.
It's great to see that, you've gotten everything in order from, your career to sort of your personal life. Tito, we appreciate the time you're giving us. One more thing we want to quickly talk to you about before we let you go is you're talking about friends and managing, and obviously Chris Cyborg is the first person that comes to mind. And just curious, some of the things that she's been going through recently. We know there was a bit of a controversy. Some people thought it was kind of funny. It was pretty entertaining, but interesting situation at the UFC retreat where her and Angela Magana were involved in a bit of an altercation. Just curious, what was your takeaway from that whole situation?
A fighter puts her hands on me, I'm punching him in the face too. You touch me, I'm defending myself, and that's what Chris did. She's seen red, and she swung because she thought she was going to get punched. And you don't put your hands on someone like Chris. That's scary. Even a woman putting her hands on Chris. That's just Chris is a very, very dangerous person. She's really dangerous with her hands. I mean, she knows. I mean, she knows now to control herself a little bit more. But I think at the time it was just built up so much of this girl bullying her on the internet, and then all of a sudden she puts her hands on Chris. Chris's reaction to defend herself. And at the end of the day, I tell her it's wrong, the wrong thing to do. But you put your hands on somebody else, expect to get punched, especially if you're a fighter. Because usually after a push, a punch does happen, and she was just reacting and defending herself. And I defend her for doing it. I would do the same thing myself.
Can you clarify that for us, Tito? Because I know the footage was out where it showed Chris punching, but right around when that happened, somebody walked in the way, and it was very hard to make out. So was it a situation where Magana sort of put her hands on Chris? Because I think a lot of people weren't really aware of that. Did Chris explain that situation, and is that how it started?
That she put her hands on Chris, and then that Chris said she doesn't know what happened, and she's seen red, so. I heard that the other girl said that she got punched in the face and she got a tooth knocked out, which she couldn't prove. I know Chris had a little scuff on her fist, but I'm sitting where you guys are sitting, where you're seeing it, and that's all I know.
Well, she's in an interesting situation, Tito. I mean, the champion of the division, Jermaine Durandami, refuses to fight her. Fans are a little bit confused as to what's going on.
Yeah, she
what's
should
going
be.
on?
All the girls that want to fight her should. I mean,
what do you make of it?
Very, very, very dangerous woman. I mean, this girl is vicious when she fights. This is not a game to her. This is not, going to play, soccer or basketball or anything. This is a fight. She's fighting for her life, and all she does is train. That's why she's one of the baddest women on the planet. She'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. And Chris Cyborg, I mean, the numbers don't lie. The girl she has earned everything she's gotten so far. That's why she'll be fighting for a vacant world title, because the other girl don't want to step up and fight.
As her manager, because I'm curious, with Chris, sometimes she posts certain things, and we're not sure how to take it. She talks about things where her contract is about to run out, and the UFC sort of needs to give her a fight. As her manager, do you want to continue seeing her in fighting in the UFC? Is that the goal? Or if the UFC can't get her these kind of fights, would you rather her sort of take her services elsewhere, where maybe she'll be appreciated and she can get the fights that she needs?
Well, I think UFC is the home for her, because it's one of the oldest organizations, that have done so well. It's on a huge main stage. I would love to see her continue to be the world champion for there. I mean, this is her choice. At the end of the day, she's the one that's doing the fighting. She's the one that's stepping in the cage and fighting in general. But, we want to make sure that she makes $1 million paydays. And we're almost there. So as soon as she does get there, she'll understand what all the hard work's been paying off for. The decision at the end of the day is her, as I said. George Prazian has a lot to do with it, with Primetime 360. He's an amazing agent. We work really hard to make sure that she says the right things, and sometimes on the internet, she lets her emotions get the best of her sometimes, and I've had that problem, and I kind of tell her not to do it, but she's a girl, and she makes mistakes, and she's human. But at the end of the day, as long as she's fighting in the UFC and fighting for the world title, I think that's her main goal.
So what is going on with her next? Because a lot of people think she's going to be on UFC 214. There's no real opponent at the moment that's a clear-cut next opponent for her. Is she going to? Do you think she's going to make UFC 214? Do you guys have any opponents at the moment that you're looking at for her to fight on that card?
Actually, I believe there's 3 opponents. I can't say the names, but we'll be letting out the news. Hopefully by the end of this week, it'll get signed and done. I know she's on the card, so we're just kind of waiting right now. This will be a George Prazian answer, a question to him and an answer from him. But I guess you can see it online at Primetime 360, that ESM, that what Chris's next fight and who she'll be fighting.
Wow. Just tell us this. Will it be potentially 135-pounders moving up, or is this a 145-pounder being brought in? If you can tell us that, Tito.
I believe it's a 145-pounder being brought in, I think. Someone's super, super tough. Actually, we got three choices. The girls are super tough. Nothing at Chris's level, so, I don't think there's any woman in the world is at Chris's level. Ronda had her choice, had her chance, and she ran away, so I don't think it's going to be even close to her. But it'll be a good name, big name. Someone's willing to fight her. Does she have a chance? Probably about a million to one, so yes, there is a chance. But Chris is a monster, man. Let me tell you, in wrestling, I have men wrestling with her, and they can't take her down or hold her down. So they're getting taken down by her. So like I say, and that's her weak suit is wrestling. Her striking is amazing. Jason Perillo's done an amazing job with the striking, along with Brian Krause. Chris just continue to train the way she is, and will be invincible. She's a very vicious woman who works really, really hard. And she'll be the next UFC 145-pound world champ.
Awesome. So fans can expect to possibly see her on that card. Just quickly, Tito, before we let you go, we want to get a prediction from you. You're freshly retired, but Bellator's going to have a huge event over at New York City. The main event, of course, Chael Sonnen versus Wanderlei Silva. Before we let you go, I want to get a quick prediction from you. You've just recently beat Chael Sonnen very, very quickly and handily. How do you see this main event going for Bellator?
I think it'll be really, really interesting. Chael Sonnen is super weak. He's kind of like a girl. He's so soft. I can't believe how soft he is. But I think Wanderlei is just buzzsaw right through him. But, Chael's wrestling is okay. If he does wrestle, if he tries to strike with Wanderlei, he's going to get knocked out. I watched a while back when he did The Ultimate Fighter how Chael did take him down pretty easy. So I think if Wanderlei worked on his takedown defense, I think it'll be a really hard fight for Chael to win. But, the Fedor fight is another fight with Mitrione, that's another fight I want to see. You know, I'd like to see Mitrione with the stand raised, but Fedor is a very, very dangerous person. And Michael Chandler is a monster. He is the Iron Mike 100%. That champ is exciting to watch. Just watching his training is amazing. So I think the card up and down is going to be great. I'll be there myself. I'll be in New York watching it live, so it's going to be exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. It's going to be an amazing card. We wish we were there as well, so we're a little bit jealous, and it's great that you'll be there so fans can go there, can meet you, obviously, you know, get a bunch of photos with you and things like that, so that's great. And Tito, I feel like we've stolen enough of your time, but we really appreciate it. We love getting updates from you, and we love hearing that everything's going well for you, obviously, in terms of career-wise. You got a lot of projects. You got the movie coming out in October with Tyler Perry, so a lot of things at the moment. Guys, you can follow Tito on Twitter at Tito Ortiz, and follow him on Instagram as well at Tito Ortiz 1999. As always, Tito, thank you so much for jumping on the program, chatting with us.
All right, cool, man. Thank you so much. And, of course, you go on YouTube, Tito Ortiz. I just made my YouTube channel. You can subscribe, and I believe on Thursday I'll have my next video up, probably about 10, 15 minutes, so hopefully I don't bore you too bad, but it'll be some exciting stuff on my career, and I'm going to start my YouTube channel and try to make it exciting. I watch The Rock does, so, you know, my editing won't be as great as his because I don't have a huge company, but I'll try to do it for myself on and do it just for my fans.
Oh, there you go. Check out Tito Ortiz. And sorry, one more time. What was the YouTube channel, Tito? How do people find it?
YouTube, Tito Ortiz. If they go on Instagram, you'll see the link on there of it says Ortiz on YouTube, and same on my Twitter also. You can see it's right on my front main page, and it'll click you right through to subscribe.
There you go, guys.
We're giving out free gifts, free punishment stuff. I'll send it to you, autograph posters, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to be signing and giving out to fans.
What a deal. Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. Go for it. Subscribe. And Tito, again, thank you so much for jumping on the program. Appreciate it.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support.
All right, guys, there he is, Tito Ortiz. So much fun to have Tito on the program, Cass. I mean, he's been coming on the show regularly for a really, really long time. All the Submission Radio listeners know that he's sort of got a home here, and we really appreciate his time. Always very giving with his time, and always happy to talk about what's going on. So always a pleasure to have him on the program.
Absolutely. And there's a lot to be talking about at the moment. Obviously, UFC Auckland just wrapped up this past weekend. It is not the end of our guests. I know normally we save the discussion of the episode till the very end, just between Dennis and myself. We do have John Morgan coming up in, I don't know, probably 20 minutes or so. He'll be previewing UFC Singapore with us, but there is a lot to talk about with UFC Auckland. A pretty great card. I feel like a lot of these local cards, they deliver in terms of fights. A lot of times they're easy to skip over because they don't have the biggest names. It is usually sort of local guys. In New Zealand, you get a lot of Kiwis. In Australia, you get a lot of Australians. But in terms of fight quality, in terms of finishes, they really do deliver. And I think this is another really good one. What did you think of the card, Dennis? And what were your big takeaways? What did you want to talk about first?
Well, you know, I think a lot of people were a bit negative on the card. On the Twitterverse, a lot of people were saying, I don't want to hang around to watch it. And I think primarily it's because the prelims didn't sort of deliver to their expectations. But I will say, I really thought the main card was a very, very solid card. And I was very excited to see some of these guys get a bit of a spotlight, guys that we wouldn't usually see get it. So overall, I thought it was actually a really fun night of fights. What am I doing? And the other thing was, sad that we weren't there to cover it. Usually we are at all these kind of local events, but couldn't get up there for this time. So, kind of thinking about all the fun times we'd have had with all the New Zealand fans, and we apologize to everyone who messaged us, and we weren't there. But, speaking of the card, I kind of want to start this conversation off by talking about one of our guests this week, Alexander Volkanovski. Now, Cass, you and me, we've been excited about Volkanovski, or Volko, as I like to call him, for quite some time. The guy has had an amazing career and has really had a tough kind of slog trying to get into the UFC, and put a lot on the line because he was a pretty good rugby player, and sort of put that to the side to fight in MMA, and was looking to sort of make a bit of money for his family and do that kind of stuff. And now we saw him, in featherweight, get his win against Hirota in a fight that was very, very impressive. What did you think of Volkanovski's performance, and what did you think of Hirota's ability to take that much punishment?
Yeah, the amount of spinning back elbows, I don't know how many spinning back elbows to the head one man is expected to take, but Hirota certainly exceeded my expectations there. I mean, he got dropped in, I think, almost every single round. I don't think he was dropped in the third round, but he's definitely dropped in the first and second. The way Volkanovski was just punishing him with blows. And we know, if there's one thing you know about Volkanovski is that he has a lot of knockout power. So the way he was just hammering away at Hirota, and Hirota was able to stay in there. You know, it's very rare that I get predictions right, but I did say in our preview show that Hirota's never been finished. Volkanovski has a lot of knockout power, so there's a good chance this is going to be a really fun, exciting fight. And it was pretty one-sided, but I mean, one of the biggest things that sort of stood out to me from Volkanovski is that when you take a guy like him, and he's a rugby player, he just has this natural athleticism. When you consider his takedowns, when you consider that he did a bit of wrestling early on, sort of when he was young, and the way that, you know, a big part of rugby is going for takedowns, it comes very naturally to him, and it's amazing the way he's lost so much weight and has really harnessed it in fighting. For a fight that didn't actually get finished, it's about as impressive as it comes. I really like that. I like that he was constantly going for the finish, and also that he was very creative with his striking. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And the other thing I liked about it was he did the interview afterwards, and he's gone with his own personality. He's a nice guy, but he wants to fight some of the bad boys. And I think, you know, he's sort of starting to get it. He's starting to understand, you know, I want to talk a little bit. I want to get some of these big matchups. And I'd really like to see, I know there could be a local fight card coming up in Australia somewhere around November, but I'd really like to see Volkanovski get a chance to fight overseas as well and start to grow his name a little bit, because I really feel like he's kind of the hidden secret of the featherweight division. Even though he did so well on this card, you know, not that many people probably were watching UFC New Zealand, unfortunately, especially overseas. So I'd really like to see the UFC try and capitalize on him and put him in a fight overseas, sort of put a little bit more, I suppose, spotlight on him, because I really think he's got the makings of going pretty far in the division. What do you think, Cass? Do you think Volkanovski has what it takes to really hang in there with the sort of top-tier guys in the featherweight division?
Well, I mean, we don't really know that yet. I think that's one of the reasons why. He's a young guy. He's, 28 years old? I think he's still pretty young in his career. He's had, 16 fights? I think 16, 17 fights. I think he definitely needs time to grow. And so I know he wants to fight a lot of fights. He wants to get another 2 this year. But I think that the key is to sort of bring him up slowly. The UFC, they don't usually nurture their talent. They don't usually, like we saw with Yair Rodriguez, he had a few impressive wins, and all of a sudden they say, all right, you're ready for Frankie Edgar, and then we saw that he wasn't. I don't know if Volkanovski is at that level, but we saw the difference from his first fight to this one. He looked so much more comfortable. He had a great stoppage in this first fight, a really impressive finish, but here he looked like he was almost in cruise control. He had very good instincts. He had very good athleticism. I think that he is still in that skill building stage, even though he's been doing this for a while. He's sort of building his skills, and I think it's important not to sort of get too crazy and say, wow, this guy's had a few impressive fights, we're going to throw him in there in the top 5. Featherweight is it is kind of dying and starving for some fresh opponents, but we saw Artem Lobov, he was doing well. He got some good wins, and they put him up against Cub Swanson, and it really wasn't even close. So I think that you bring him up slowly, do what Bellator does with, say, Michael Venom Page, and sort of feed fighters, other fighters, and build them and give them that time to sort of grow into their spot, grow into sort of, the big leagues, because I think he's sort of going to need that if he's going to hang in there with the top guys. But hey, if we did have an Aussie in the featherweight division doing really well, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I think in the long run, it's kind of good that this fight kind of went the distance, the 3 rounds. I think it gives them that experience in the octagon of being able to say, hey, I went through these 3 rounds. Gives you a bit more confidence, gets you used to the octagon. I know people say this all the time, but that first fight, getting used to the octagon, especially if you fight in smaller promotions and not used to the media, the octagon, all that kind of stuff, that can really play a factor. So great to see that happening. Let's jump up the card a little bit, Caster. Ben 10's super quick win over Tim Elliott. I was super surprised when I heard Tim Elliott's interview. I think it was with MMA Junkie, where he spoke about the fact that he only came in a few days before the fight was happening. Usually fighters sort of get in a week or so beforehand to acclimate. He didn't have that, I suppose, opportunity to do that. But he said he was, going to take the opportunity by its horns and sort of it's not going to affect him at all. In the fight, it was a quick finish for Ben 10. I think a lot of people thought Tim Elliott was going to win this, especially after the amazing performance he had against Demetrius Johnson. What was your reaction when you saw Ben 10 do what he did in the octagon against Tim Elliott, and so quickly and out of nowhere?
I was shocked and humbled, man. I was completely wrong. I thought this was going to be a back and forth fight. Like I said in the preview show, I thought that with Tim Elliott's scrambles and with Ben 10's, you know, he didn't have the greatest statistics in terms of takedown defense. He is susceptible to takedown. So I thought that a guy like Tim Elliott, he'll be able to take advantage of that. It's going to be a 3-round decision. I didn't see Tim Elliott necessarily finishing him, but I thought he was going to be pretty dominant. And for Ben 10 to just go in there and choke him out, I mean, amazing. Like, especially with all the things that are going on in flyweight, it's a really great statement to say. And I mean, again, no one's really under the impression that the flyweight division is really going anywhere, but I like afterwards that Ben 10 got on the mic. He didn't really put anyone on blast, but he mentioned that people like seeing these exciting fights, people like seeing these finishes, and he doesn't really know what's going on with the flyweight division, but the crowd sort of got behind him. And I mean, for a guy like Tim Elliott, who's ranked at number 8 and now Ben 10 to beat him, it's crazy for a guy like Ben 10 to be finally ranked in the top 10.
And now his second win in a row. I mean, everybody remembers his loss to Louis Smolka, but he's on his way back up. He's on his way back up, and he's just such a nice guy, a fascinating guy. We ran into his wife on a plane once, and if you guys would have seen the sort of embedded type video, the vlog that we did from one of our first trips up there, you would have seen us talking to him in the airport. He is a super nice guy, and very happy to see what happens to him next, because 2 wins in a row in a division that you can argue, you know, not as many sort of big names, not as much stuff going on. It's good to see him sort of get the W there. Let's jump over to this lightweight fight between Dan Hooker and Ross Pearson. I mean, Ross Pearson really spoke about the fact that he didn't really evolve with the game, you know, with his training, with his strategies, and was looking to show off a different Ross Pearson in this fight, a more complete Ross Pearson here. However, it didn't end up very, very well for him when Dan Hooker knocked him out with just an unbelievable knee that kind of came out of nowhere and just was absolutely brutal. That was, of course, his lightweight debut. Dan Hooker previously fought at featherweight. Cass, your thoughts on that knee? Because that thing, when you watch the replay of it, it's just unbelievably timed.
Yeah, my girlfriend nearly crashed her car because I was sitting next to her in the passenger seat, watching on Foxtel Go, watching the fights, and I think I looked away for a second, I looked back down, and I was like, oh shit! It was absolutely beautiful, and my girlfriend nearly crashed the car, we nearly died, but it's exactly what Dan Hooker needed. These guys are both sort of at crossroads. When a guy moves to another division, it's great because they're sort of on a fresh start, and you can sort of forgive a lot of things. Even if they stumble in the beginning, you can kind of say, well, you know, it was their first time. But Dan Hooker, he really took the opportunity and excelled. Ross Pearson, one of the things about him is, you know, he may not always win the fight, but generally speaking, it's in a close fight. It's a decision loss or a split decision loss, as has been his last, I don't know, many fights. And to brutally knock him out is just amazing. The last man to knock him out like that, or knock him out in general, was Al Iaquinta, and that was all the way back in 2014. So, I mean, I think we're certainly seeing, and have been for a while, seeing the decline of Ross Pearson. It doesn't really look like he's able to hang in there with the top of the guys, which is a shame because really he was a pioneer. He was always a fun fighter, Ultimate Fighter Season 9 winner, did a lot for MMA in the UK, but I think it's very hard to sort of break the mold of when you're on a whole bunch of losses at the moment. He sort of went over and wanted to try and rejuvenate himself, do new things. But I think I'm curious where his confidence is, because going to this fight, he was on 3 losses in a row. And I think considering how vocal he's been in the past about, you know, some of the fighters not sort of really fighting him and playing it safe and things like that, I don't know if he'll get another chance in the UFC.
Yeah, 4 fights, kid. I know he's been a big champion for the UFC in this part of the world, in Australia. Obviously, he lives down here now, but it will be tough to see him get one more fight in the UFC. And the thing is, he was doing a pretty good job. He had some good head movement, some good feints, but that knee that just came out of nowhere and was perfectly timed. I mean, with his 4th loss in a row, you'd think that mentally he'd be at a crossroads, like you said. So interesting to see what happens there. And with Dan, I mean, lightweight really just seems like the home for him when you look at him and his body. Yeah, he looked so different, didn't he, Cass? I mean, this muscle, he had a lot more muscle. He looked a lot more comfortable. But still, with Dan, the big thing there is utilizing his reach. You know, he's got to use that reach. He's got to utilize the fact that he's got such long arms, really use it to his advantage. And I think he's getting more and more comfortable with it. It was his lightweight debut, but I'm very excited to see what happens with it next. And big shame he couldn't be on the program today because he was on a farm with his family in New Zealand that had no reception, because we had a lot of questions for Dan. But Don't worry, guys. I'm sure we'll get him on in the future. He's a big star in New Zealand. I mean, we keep repeating it on our Twitter for all the international fans out there, but a lot of people love him in New Zealand. He's got a big following over there, and he's got a ute with his name across it, an Isuzu ute that was provided to him everywhere he goes. Kind of parks it out the front. People come in, hang out with him. He is a great guy, just a fantastic guy to the fans. So it's good to see a big personality from New Zealand get such a big win. Let's jump over to the main event, Cass. I mean, Mark Khan was able to pick up. Hold on.
We forgot one of our favorites, Dad's Army himself, Dan Kelly.
It's so hard to talk about. I mean, I thought I picked for him here. Derek Brunson went out and did what, a lot of people believed was going to happen. I think hearts broke across New Zealand and Australia. What was your reaction in the car when you saw that happen? Was it close to another crash, or was it just a sort of sad sigh that the girlfriend heard as she was driving?
I think I was at home by that time, so the tears were shed on my pillow. So all
brutal. It was brutal. Yeah.
Look. Again, preview show, I picked it. I did say, if you're going to, Dan Kelly, he does get better as the rounds go on. We saw what Sam Alvey was able to do. We saw what Derek Brunson was able to do, Sam Alvey. And I thought that this was going to happen. It's going to be a first-round stoppage. But look, yeah, it is sad. I mean, we try and be unbiased here because at the end of the day, that is our job. But I don't think it's really that devastating for Kelly. Derek Brunson got knocked out in the first round as well, and that was, 2 fights ago. And Dan, he won 4 in a row prior to this, and now he's lost 1 to a guy that people still think may be a future contender. I mean, it sucks for him. It sucks for his family. But if Dan Kelly can sort of keep fighting these guys, even if they aren't ranked, and if he keeps sort of racking up wins, he stands to have quite a bit of success in the UFC. I don't think people necessarily expect Dan to win the title, but as it stands, his UFC record is 6-2. That's a pretty good record. We're talking about Jose Aldo the other week, and I think his record was 8-2, and he's the greatest featherweight of all time. Of course, records don't say anything. Aldo's competition is obviously very different to Dan Kelly's, but I think we'll see Dan choose to retire before the UFC chooses to cut him. I don't think his job is on the line. He did mention that if he didn't win at UFC 193 and he got cut, that he was probably going to retire. Maybe with the success he's had recently and the UFC seeing how everybody's gotten behind him, I think they'll continue to push him. Maybe they've seen that, all right, he hit a bump. We're not going to, feed him to the top 5 guys at middleweight. But I think regardless, it's given him the extra confidence to where one loss doesn't really bother him, and he's happy to continue. We'd love to get him on the program and chat to him about it, but I think how much longer he fights in the UFC, it's really up to him. I don't think he loses that much in this fight. What about you?
I don't think he loses that much in this fight from a standpoint of where fans see him, but I think he loses a lot in this fight from taking a huge blow to his brain at the age that he's at and in the condition that he's at. So for me, the only thing I'm kind of worried about is I just don't want the UFC to put him. I know there's that event coming up in November. That should be a bit of time, but I want his team to make sure that he's okay. The scans come back clear. He doesn't rush back into it too soon. And hopefully not too much damage was caused, because it was a pretty significant KO. I mean, he was laying down there, and you don't want to see a sort of an older fighter have to take too much brain damage after taking a knockout like that. So if he's able to come back nice and healthy from that KO, I'd really like to see him sort of have some fun fights in the UFC. I agree with you, though. I mean, Dan Kelly down in this part of the world in Australia, people love him. People love him in New Zealand. There's still a lot of fun fights for him to be had. And that's the thing in the middleweight division. I mean, the top is so blocked up, but there's so many names in there that he could possibly fight and have those co-main event type spots in these more local cards against, that there's still a lot of fun to be had. But I think first and foremost, I just want to see how he goes physically after this knockout and that everything's okay. We worried about our dad's army here. But nevertheless, I mean, it was a good win for Brunson. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, this is Dan Kelly here, blah, blah, blah. But Brunson, we all heard it. He was going through some difficult times. He stayed home for this training camp and opened up his own gym and trained from there. There was a lot on the line for him, possibly losing against Dan Kelly, his 3rd loss in a row. So for him, I think this was a huge win as well. And it also reinforced the fact that, hey, maybe he doesn't need to sort of leave home every time he's got a fight coming up, and he can train from there as well. It seemed like he was a lot more comfortable in doing that than sort of leaving his family and going up to Albuquerque.
That's a really good point. I don't think people understand just how much pressure was probably riding on Derek Brunson in this fight. You know, a couple of fights ago, he was the toast of the town, and now he was on a 2-fight skid. Even though that Anderson Silva fight, you know, really should have gone his way, I think that he was really fighting to, I don't want to say clinging to relevancy, but, you know, for a guy who a lot of people sort of still see as potentially the future of the division, but is kind of up there in age. He's not the freshest of faces. He really needed to you know, beat a guy like Dan Kelly, who people still underrate. You know, if Dan would have beaten him, it would have been great for Dan, but it would have been pretty devastating for Derek in terms of his title aspirations. And I think more than anything, you know, you go in there, you get a quick win. I think with Derek Brunson, he feels like he's got his mojo back, and I think confidence was kind of lacking after that Robert Whittaker loss, and I think now, taking what he learned from that Robert Whittaker fight, learning that, look, it's not all about just going in there and putting a show, and then learning from that Anderson Silva fight where he sort of respected Anderson, I think he's sort of utilizing all those things, you know, mixed with the fact that he's training in, I think, North Carolina, staying at home. I'm expecting him to really take on the division and make big things. Is there anyone particular that you sort of eye in the division at the moment? Any names that stand out? Any people that you've been eyeing somewhere in the rankings? Derek is at 8 at the moment. Anyone that you would potentially like to see him face next?
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight David Branch. You know, I thought that could be a fun fight, a good one for him to have. At least David Branch is in the top 10. It's pretty relevant for him to sort of go up against him. I think a lot of people would like to see what happens in that fight. I mean, I think, you know, the top kind of 7 is pretty tied up at the moment. You know, Anderson Silva, who knows what's going on with him? Chris Weidman's busy. I mean, you could always throw him to Jacare and see what happens there. Gegard, we're not sure exactly what's going on, and I don't think Gegard would be interested in taking that fight in the position that he's at. I mean, Luke Rockhold, he's number 2 and he doesn't have a fight. Would Luke Rockhold be interested in taking that fight, though? I don't know.
I think Rockhold and Gegard is probably the fight that they're going to make. I think those guys are pretty much inching closer. I'm expecting almost any day now that fight's going to be announced. And I don't think, you know, we've spoken to Rockhold many times, and he's basically called out guys like Whittaker, Jacare, guys who are basically about to fight for the title, or Yoel Romero, who are, you know, should be fighting for the title. I don't think Rockhold would want to fight a guy like Derek Brunson at the moment. I think he's deserving of more, but I think this Gegard fight's probably going to happen between Rockhold. So yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind a David Branch fight. I feel like after the last fight, David Branch sort of, you know, it was a win, but it didn't really go the way that he wanted. I think he sort of still got a lot to prove, even though he's coming off, you know, being a World Series, a dual division champion, a World Series of fighting. And I think Derek Brunson, if he can beat a guy like David Branch, that's a big feather in his cap. Branch hasn't lost in ages. And likewise, if Branch can beat Derek Brunson, all of a sudden he's got a ton of momentum behind him.
And speaking of Derek's, I mean, let's talk about this main event in Auckland, because it was a very, very fun fight between Mark Hunt and Derrick Lewis, a fight that I was personally really looking forward to, just to see where Mark Hunt was after his loss to Alistair Overeem. And I know Derrick Lewis has been able to put together an impressive streak, and people have really gotten behind him. A little bit of news happening throughout the fight. I mean, obviously Mark Hunt was able to win, but it seemed like there was a back problem that was plaguing Derrick Lewis near the end of the fight that kind of sort of put a stop to, I suppose, his momentum, and kind of made him just kind of sort of stand there with his hands down and trying to survive the onslaught that Mark Hunt was putting on him. What did you think of the wrap up at the end, where Derrick Lewis admitted that it could be the last time that we see him fight in the UFC?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of ways to take it. I mean, my first initial reaction was that I didn't really think that it would stick. You know, he's got a lot of momentum behind him at the moment, and you know, back injuries, while they can be really bad, we saw Kenny Florian retire after a back injury, and that was after he fought Jose Aldo for the title. I just thought, he's on so much momentum. He's done so many good things in the UFC. You know, he's walking around with those like miniature little title belts. I was watching actually compilations of Derrick Lewis's, I don't know what they're called, rawest or savage moments. The guy's just absolutely hilarious. And I thought for him to have so much momentum, it's kind of crazy to just, you know, not at least have, you know, consider surgery, consider coming back. But at the end of the day, that's a really big thing to come back from. You know, back surgery is very serious. Sometimes you need to have multiple back surgeries consecutively. He might be out for a year. He might be out for longer. By the time he has that back injury, then maybe he has to, you know, go through a ton of therapy, a ton of physio, work himself back up. And the thing is, he's been on so much momentum. He's sort of been getting better and better with each fight, you know, getting stronger, getting fitter, working on his skills. And he's a guy that, like we've said on this show before, there is a skill gap between him and the top of the division. So maybe he's sort of looking at it as if he takes a year or so off of a very long time. And, again, the surgery might not even take. It's always a risk. He may have the surgery. It may not be a permanent fix for him to sort of come back and go through all that again and work his way back up. Maybe he's sort of honest with himself that maybe he won't be the same guy and maybe he doesn't really want to do it. And the other thing is about Derrick Lewis, he struck me as a guy who doesn't really love MMA, and I don't say that in a rude way. I'm not saying he's not passionate, but he's not really, like when we were at UFC 200, he was saying he doesn't even know anything about Fedor. He was saying, I don't know anything about Fedor. Is he good? And then someone said, yeah, he's great. He's like, all right, great. Well, then I like Fedor. He's not really the type of guy that grew up on the sport. I think people have said that he sort of got into it to pay off his house, and every time he gets into the cage, he's scared. He's naturally frightened. He's been very honest about that. So at the same time, I see him as a guy who would be able to let go of that. That part of his life, move on to other things, be content with the money that he's made, and sort of, know that, well, he paid off his house, he made a bit of money for his kids, and if this has helped him get other offers, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes those other offers in other ways to make money and provide for his family, because I think that's really all it was for him in terms of MMA.
And I think family is the key word here. He doesn't want to put his family through that anymore, and I think that's the other factor. I mean, back injury or not, even if his back was healthy, it really looks like the fact that his family's so stressed out about it has an effect on him. And I think, that could be the reason why he sort of steps away from it. I mean, he's probably paid off the house already and he's got other opportunities. And if it's impacting his family life that much, and he, like you mentioned, isn't really a big fan of the sport and was just doing it for monetary reasons, I think there's a very real chance that's the last time we see him. I know Brian Stan sort of tried to do the best job he could and sort of asked him, is this it? And trying to get a definitive answer from him. But I'm just curious to hear from Derrick Lewis in the near future to find out how bad is his back injury, what's this really all about, and what he'll be doing next is also what I'd be interested in, because I mean he's made a lot of new fans. He's got comedic timing, comedy gold. He can really do a whole bunch of stuff. Commentary, different fun commentary videos, something in the MMA world. There's a lot of opportunities for him. So interested to see what happened to him next. Before we wrap this up and jump to John Morgan, who's going to be waiting for us in just a moment, what's next for Mark Hunt? I mean, this is a huge win for him. He beat a guy that a lot of people felt was going to beat him. Took a lot of that momentum onto himself. A lot of people are thinking, what should be next for him? He's in this battle with the UFC right now, but I mean, there's no way to look around it. The heavyweight division doesn't have much going on, and with Derrick Lewis out, and I mean Derrick Lewis was a big part of that division. A lot of people thought he was going to have a lot of the big fights in the future. With Derrick Lewis out, Roy Nelson gone, what do you do with Mark Hunt next? I mean, does the UFC have no other choice but to give him some of those big fights to sell some of their pay-per-views?
Yeah, and just before I even answer that, it was really funny watching the whole lead up to this event where Mark Hunt was on the UFC's social media, he was on their media days, things like that. I don't know if you saw that Q&A on Facebook, and everybody was trying to troll Mark Hunt about like Brock Lesnar, and you could see like for a guy like Mark Hunt who's uncensored, he was trying to behave. He's like, oh, I'm not gonna like talk too much shit, but he can't do it. He was still saying Brock Lesnar this and cheating and juice monkeys and stuff like that. So it always cracks me up because I imagine that the UFC PR people and social media people are sitting there on pins and needles like, oh god, I hope we don't have a meltdown, I hope this doesn't become an episode. So I found that really funny, but good on Mark Hunt, sort of staying true to what he believes, and yet still staying professional when really he could have said a lot of things that he chose not to say. As far as his standings in the division, this is kind of a crazy situation because on one hand this fight was kind of like whatever, it's Mark Hunt's probably not going to be getting a title shot after this, but Derrick Lewis is kind of in a different situation, coming in a 6-fight win streak. The UFC thinks, well, if he wins, we've got our next title challenger. Not only did Derrick Lewis lose, but now he's saying he might retire. So you kind of left with Mark Hunt, and Mark Hunt lost, a pretty brutal fight to Stipe Miocic. So I don't think he's really any closer to to getting a title shot at the moment. You the two guys that are waiting in the wings, people talking about Fabrizio Verdum and Alistair Overeem, again, two guys that Mark Hunt has lost recently to. So I don't see him getting rematches with any of those guys in the, super near future. Maybe if Cain Velasquez can become champion, I think that opens up something fresh. I think at the moment, Mark Hunt, considering, he's won one fight coming off a loss to Overeem, I think what makes sense is potentially the winner of Andrei Arlovski and Marcin Tybura. They're fighting pretty soon. Sort of another way for Andrei Arlovski to sort of show that he's still in there. He's still, I guess, relevant these days, and Marcin potentially to get a big win. And I guess Mark Hunt, he's sort of in this rebuilding stage. He's got, 3 fights left on his contract, and it is the heavyweight division. It's a very thin division. That is probably exactly in the amount of fights that he'll need to get back into title contention, if not, even a title shot, depending on what happens in the division.
Yeah, I'm big on this Andrei Arlovski fight if Arlovski wins in Singapore, and also maybe a fight against Travis Brown. That could be a fun fight to put together as well. But interested to see what happens next. Now, as mentioned, we have our next guest waiting on the line to speak to us, and I believe, Cass, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, our next guest can be recognized at ringside of almost every UFC event in his signature blue polo. The man with one of the silkiest voices in the game. You can enjoy him and Cold Coffee on their podcast, The MMA Roadshow. It is absolute must listen, as well as their amazing weekly coverage on MMAJunkie.com. John Morgan, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going?
It is going good, man. Wrapping up a month-long journey around the world, but it's been an interesting trip, to say the least.
Well, we're enjoying having you in our neck of the woods. You were in New Zealand before. Now you're in Singapore. Tell us, how have you enjoyed being in this part of the world for a change?
Loved it. Other than the constant jet lag that I'm facing or whatever, but it's beautiful, man. New Zealand is such a beautiful place. I'd really, hopefully, one day like to bring my family there, man. So it's absolutely gorgeous. We got to go check out a rugby game while we were there. It was a little chilly, winter time, but that was gorgeous. And then once we wrapped up that week, coming out here to Singapore, where I'm at now, certainly just one of the most unique places on earth as well, but for an entirely different reason. It's the nature of New Zealand is gorgeous, and then the modern construction of everything here is pretty overwhelming as well. So it's been a cool couple of weeks.
Just curious, there's plenty of frosty beverages in Auckland. What did you think of some of the frosty beverages, the beer scene, any other fun stories? Because we know a lot of the fun with the MMA Junkie crew, it takes place in and around the recording of the MMA Roadshow.
Yeah, man, we ended up hanging out a lot at a place called Empire Tavern. That was really cool to us, man, and we enjoyed that there. They had I guess it's the oldest bar in Auckland, actually, but to say it like that way makes it sound like it's some kind of rundown dive bar or whatever. But I mean, they've kept it really nice and modern, and the people there were just really, really cool. So we actually spent a lot of time, and we actually got to get out and have a beverage around that spot. So that was good. And, at the rugby game was cool as well, man, to see the passion there. That was the first one I'd ever seen live. We definitely tipped a few there. A fan, Lucas McIver, was actually nice enough to buy us tickets, and he got some awesome seats for us. And, man, it was just a good run, man. It really was. So we had a good time. The people of New Zealand, they definitely enjoy their frosty beverages just like you Aussies. And enjoy their MMA as well. So it was a good time. I tell you what, I always do love the morning shows. I don't know if you guys love it, but I love when I come here into Australia, New Zealand market. Now it's different here in Singapore, but in Australia, New Zealand, they always have the morning shows. I love it, man. You get done, working, and there's still an evening. Instead of getting done hell, I'm sure you guys remember wrapping up at Madison Square Garden at 5 a.m. or whatever that was that one time. That gets old after a while, trying to stay up late. I mean, getting done and actually having an evening still. I kind of like the morning fights.
It's a lot of fun, and it's kind of fun as well for the people that watch it. They get up after a big night out on Sunday, and then they kind of enjoy it in the pub. They have their meal with their friends. It's a really fun process. It's so different, and everybody overseas who hasn't had a chance to check it out, if you ever do come down here, I think you guys will definitely enjoy it. Now, John, we want to look forward to Singapore, but before we do, let's just quickly touch on the UFC Auckland fights. There's a few big fights that we want to get your thoughts on first. Dan Hooker, his win over Ross Pearson was pretty remarkable. How did you like that knee from Octagon side, and what would you like to see next for Hooker?
Man, really cool stuff there for Dan Hooker. The Auckland guy, so doing it there in front of his crowd, it was cool. They had some of his fans there actually had some of those big cutout heads, in the audience or whatever. So those were around. So, it was a really neat experience. And, first of all, let me just say, I love him moving up to 155 pounds. He's a tall kid, and that cut down to 145, I don't think did him any good at all. So I like him at 155. Not that the losses he had at 145 were bad. I mean, you look at the names that he lost to, you're talking about some real top talent, but I just think he's a better fit at 155 physically. And I thought he looked good, man. I thought his stand-up, looked improved and comfortable. I will say, man, I kind of felt bad for Ross Pearson because I really feel like Ross was kind of starting to hit his stride in the second round. He was starting to, the head movement, the angles that he was attacking with were good. He looked solid and was starting to move past that jab a little bit of Dan Hooker, but then Hooker landed that brutal KO knee. So yeah, it's just a spectacular win for him, and a spectacular performance. And to do it there in New Zealand was pretty cool. And then, how do you love this kid? It's his time on the microphone, and instead of big upping himself, he's big upping other people. Talking about other people that need to be in the UFC. I love that. A guy that's reaching out and giving love to his teammates and to other New Zealanders. So yeah, as far as what's next, I don't know. I mean, that's such a deep division. I feel like, it's not like he's making waves. Like, let's start looking at the top 10 now. No, he's got some work to do, but I think his future is definitely in the lightweight division.
Yeah, absolutely. Great win for Dan. Let's talk about the main event. It was a really good fight between Mark Hunt and Derrick Lewis. Fans were pretty shocked to hear that, Lewis saying that it was very likely be the last time he steps into the octagon. We know you guys have a very good relationship. Did you have any idea that he was going to make that announcement?
I didn't. It was really shocking to me and wanted to speak to him afterwards, but, he kind of respected his privacy. Obviously, it was a difficult moment for him. Hopefully, we'll catch up with him soon. Knowing Derrick, it's interesting because we have been kind of close to him during his rise, and, he was always kind of the reluctant superstar or whatever. I mean, the guy, I think, is one of the most unique characters in the game. His social media game is still legend, even afterwards. But, he gets kind of nervous. He's kind of a shy guy, which is kind of wild. I mean, he doesn't really like fighting. It's even, as big and as strong and as powerful as he is, he doesn't like this stuff, man. He does it because it happens to be something he's good at, and he wants to provide for his family financially, but it's not something he particularly enjoys. So I don't think it was necessarily shocking, in retrospect. I certainly wasn't expecting it, but I think it'll change, to be honest with you. He's in Hawaii this week getting married. Certainly I think that's something he probably wanted to look forward to, and I imagine he'll take some time off, some much needed time off. The guy had one of the busiest schedules in the heavyweight division you could ask for. I think a little time away, he'll realize that, hey, listen, there's still some good fights on the horizon for me. There's still some good paychecks on the horizon for me, and even though maybe this isn't something I necessarily love doing, a couple more paychecks in the bank to take care of my family sure would be a good thing.
Me and Casper were sort of discussing it before you came on the show, and one of the things we're trying to figure out is it the back injury, or is it the fact that he's never really kind of enjoyed the sport, was doing it more for monetary reasons, and his family, it affects his family so much? If you kind of had to narrow it down to something, is it the fact that he's dealing with his back injury, or do you think it's the fact that his family is so affected by him fighting?
It's a good question, man. I think it's definitely a little bit of both. It was one moment I videoed it and I didn't show it just because it was kind of it's kind of difficult or whatever. But him leaving the octagon as he walked by press row, usually I like to get a little clip of people in case they want to deliver a message, or if we just see something that's kind of relevant or whatever. But he actually stopped. I mean, he had to stop basically on the way back and pause for a second and kind of like stretches back. I mean, he looked like a decrepit old man for a second. He had to kind of lean against the octagon, put his hand on it, and kind of like work his back out a little bit. So, I kind of hate the fact that he even brought it up in the cage, because I think instantly the crowd was like, oh, here come the excuses, your back injury. You know what I mean? And I think maybe that's the way it was treated. But physically, what I saw afterwards is he was just being very honest, and I think he had some difficulty moving, to be honest with you. So, but I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I don't think he ever really wanted to do this. It's just pretty damn good at it, and he's fun to watch fight, man. I hope he comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in a thin division like the heavyweight division, when you got a guy with so much personality, you need all of those that you can get. And quickly, John, we know there were a couple of good fights in the prelims. We have Alexander Volkanovski. Just spoke to him before on the show. He's looked really good thus far in the UFC. What do you think his potential in the featherweight division? He seems to, be one of the best kept secrets in the division currently.
He is. He's flying under the radar. The guy's got, 12 wins in a row now? I mean, it's an impressive streak that he's on. He's got a little bit of personality as well. He's fun to talk to. He shows up to media day sporting the bow tie. It was hilarious. I was like, man, is this just kind of your thing? He's like, dude, I can't afford another suit right now. He's like, let me make a little cash, and maybe I won't be wearing the bow tie next time. So yeah, man, I think he's really got some upside. Now fighting in the featherweight division, out of making his debut at lightweight, he says, this is really where he belongs. To me, he's just a guy that really does have some upside.
All right, well, let's look forward to Singapore. It's a card featuring some really interesting bouts. Let's go through the main card, kicking it off as a fight between RDA and Derrick Saffiedine. RDA is making his welterweight debut. Do you think not having to cut all that weight will lead to seeing a different Rafael in the octagon?
I do, especially because I feel like his game is based so much on like pressure and movement and that sort of thing. Because he's not a big guy, which is interesting. To think about him going at 170 at first, I was like, man, I don't know. That reach at 170 pounds, and you're going against a guy in Derrick Saffiedine, especially that is going to tower over him a bit. But I do think it'll do. I mean, that weight cut was incredibly difficult for Rafael dos Anjos. So I think the fact that maybe he'll be a little bit fresher, I think it could be very good for him. Now, the problem is, I don't know what that means long term. You start to get up to the, as you move up the ranks a little bit, the guys that you're dealing with are going to be so much bigger than you. But yeah, man, I really feel like we're starting to realize, and I mean, people have been saying it all along. I think fighters are starting to realize as well, hey, maybe like getting your body to within like, an ounce or two of, death through dehydration 24 hours before you're supposed to be in peak physical performance for a fist fight isn't the wisest thing. So I'm kind of intrigued by this move, and I think it was probably wise, to be honest with you.
It's interesting because when I look at this matchup, I go, which man has the more interesting story? Saffiedine was an absolute killer, and then had his issues. Now he's back. RDA, a lot of people a little bit down on him after his last couple of performances. Who do you think has sort of the biggest X factor going into this fight?
I think Rafael dos Anjos. I mean, the guy has obviously performed at the highest level, and yeah, I mean, people are down on him, but the names that he's faced, the people that he's lost to. I mean, part of it I think is the association with Conor McGregor. I mean, I think that impacted his reputation. I think people just kind of unfairly shit on him, to be honest with you. So I think he's still a really talented fighter. I think the question mark to me is just, does it translate to 170 pounds? So that's the question. I mean, Derrick Saffiedine, I mean, there are a lot of questions around him too. I mean, a guy that came in with all the promise in the world. I mean, gosh, I think back to the last time we were in Singapore, back in January 2014, we had that just scintillating Hung Yu Lim when Hung Yu Lim kind of came at him with that primal scream in the 5th round. I mean, that was such a fun fight. So I think injuries have kind of taken away a lot of Derrick Saffiedine's career. So I think there's certainly some question marks around him. And I don't know if there's a ton of future upside. It's hard to say, just because will his body hold up? So you're right, question marks around both of them. But as far as kind of the X factor goes, I got to go with RDA. I mean, this is a former champion that's now trying to compete at 170 pounds, and I'm intrigued to see how he performs here.
It is an intriguing matchup, and hopefully we'll be treated to some really sweet leg kicks between both guys. Speaking of Saffiedine, a man who beat him in his last fight, Dong Yoon Kim, takes on the highly touted Colby Covington. For Colby, this is a big challenge, fighter the number 7 ranked Kim. Do you think he can rise to the occasion?
I think he can. I'm a big fan of Colby Covington, man. I've kind of been close to his UFC career. He debuted actually in Macau, if I remember right. I think his second fight was in Brazil. And so, both those fights, there were no, American media there whatsoever. And so I actually had a chance to interview him because, in both situations, he was one of the few English speakers on the card. And so it was like, well, as long as I'm here, let me talk to this kid who's, kind of a prospect or whatever. And watching his rise has been, I mean, from day one, this guy had this swagger about him. He had this confidence about him, and I think his game has evolved to match that, because I think in the beginning people were like, dude, here's this guy that's, boasting so much, but, he's kind of laying and praying a little bit. You know what I mean? He's got kind of this grinding style, and I think that's evolving. I mean, it's still a wrestling-based game, but it is about, positional advances and doing damage while you're on top. And, I think he's grasped the role of being the villain. I mean, gosh, I can't wait. I'm actually about to go talk to him in a couple hours, and I can't wait to ask him how the hell he did that email thing where he showed like RDAs. I can't wait. I just want to know how he did it. Like, that was awesome. That was one of the best trash talking I've ever seen in my life. But so I like this guy. I like his swagger. I like his attitude. This is the test right here, right? Dong Yoon Kim, a guy that's been in the UFC, almost a decade. I mean, that's insane. The guy's been fighting in the UFC since 2008. The career record is amazing. he's had some setbacks as of late. He kind of got into that style where he just started throwing caution to the wind. And you knew you were getting a spinning elbow every single time he came out or whatever. But yeah, man, a guy that still has an incredible record. So I'm incredibly intrigued by this matchup. I feel like maybe though this is just kind of Colby Covington's time to shine. This is his time to come up. Dong Hyun Kim, 35 years old. Maybe he's, I don't want to say getting towards the end of it, but I just think maybe Colby Covington is it's his time to shine, so to speak. He's that next generation guy.
Yeah, I still remember when Dong Hyun Kim was on a good streak and he called out GSP, and the crowd had no idea what he just said. That was a pretty funny moment. And please ask, I know you will, please ask Colby about that email, because every time I think about Colby, I always think, like, did he actually sit there and Photoshop that himself? Was it a manager? And if he really did that himself, it's amazing.
Bro, I'm seriously, I know some people might not care. It's like the one reason I wanted to come to Singapore, so I could ask him how he did that. It is the most, because he either spent like hours putting that together, or he found some awesome generator that we all need to know about.
Yeah, I need to know his secrets. Moving on to the co-main event, you've got a fight that kind of flew under the radar. Andrei Arlovski, he's back, and he's trying to bounce back from a 4-fight slide, which has included 3 TKO losses. He's fighting the Polish Marcin Tybura, who's riding a 2-fight winning streak and is a former M1 global heavyweight champion. And the majority of Marcin's victories have actually come via TKO or KO. So do you see Andrei Arlovski potentially using some of his sambo to clinch up and use the cage to wear Marcin down, or do you see this sort of being an all-out war and someone potentially going out in the first round?
I think Andrei's got to fight smart, and I know we're not supposed to have a vested interest in these fights as journalists, but I don't know if I can live in a world where Andrei Arlovski can't beat Marcin Tybura. You know what I mean? Like, this is the former champion. You know what I mean? This is the former superstar. I mean, this guy was the face of the company for a little bit. One of them anyway. I mean, he was one of the most recognizable superstars in the game, and he's been on a difficult run. There's no question about it. I'm glad the UFC gave him another opportunity. But you look at the names that he's lost to. I mean, Stipe, Alistair, Barnett, and Ngannou. I mean, we're talking about beast, right? I mean, the absolute top tier. So I'm not ready to write him off yet. Heck, I feel like we wrote off Andrei Arlovski before, right? I mean, years ago, and he came back and went on that run. But yeah, that said, I don't think just standing and banging with Marcin Tybura is a wise decision. I mean, Tybura, I don't think is nearly as fast, nearly as athletic naturally as Andrei Arlovski. He is a tank of a man. He is as durable as they come. He will stand in front of you. He will bang. But I just feel like Arlovski has greater physical tools. So I think if he can really focus on technique, really focus on not getting involved in any kind of slugfest, that it bodes well for Andrei Arlovski. So I'm leaning towards Arlovski in this fight. I did put him down as my staff pick as well. Yeah, man, it's an interesting. If he loses this fight, I hate to say it, man, but if Andrei loses this fight, I feel like that's the last time we see him.
Well, that was going to be my next question. You just kind of answered it as far as stakes and what's on here on the line. You said you couldn't live in a world where Andrei Arlovski doesn't beat Marcin Tybura. Do you feel like this is kind of his last crack at not only sort of sticking around in relevance, but if he doesn't, for his own safety, especially if it's another unfortunate KO that Arlovski fans are kind of used to seeing, that this should sort of be the end for him?
I do, and I hate to say that. I mean, I don't feel like it's my job to retire fighters, but I mean, he's getting up there, right? I mean, he's what, 38 years old now. I mean, it's I think the end is closer than it's ever been. I mean, it's definitely on the horizon, and I just, I mean, he's done it before. He's left the UFC and gone and fought elsewhere, but I don't know, man. I just don't know if he wants to go, start over in Bellator or something like that. I don't know if that's really up to him. I mean, heck, maybe, with all the happenings in the Russian market, with the EFN and ACB. I mean, maybe he's still named out that he could go get some favorable matchups over there. But, as far as, competing at the UFC, competing at the highest level, I think if he suffers another loss, that's probably it for him. So, yeah, I do feel like those are kind of the stakes in this matchup is what is the future of Andrei Arlovski. And that's not to take anything away from Marcin Tybura. As you said, he's accomplished some things on the regional stage, and he's a tough guy. And, is certainly pleasant to deal with. But, I feel like, yeah, the question marks and the intrigue here really lies completely around Arlovski for me.
I feel like there's some crazy Japanese fights in Ryzen set up for Arlovski as soon as he leaves the UFC against some questionable opponents. Let's quickly talk about this main event, Holly Holm versus Betch Correia. I mean, when thinking about this matchup and Ronda's fast win over Betch, and that kind of comes to mind to many fans, Ronda was able to win via KO pretty quickly. A lot of people believe if Ronda's able to win via KO pretty quickly, Holly Holm should have no problems against Betch in this matchup. But having lost back-to-back fights and having sort of a different strategy to Ronda where she doesn't come forward nearly as much, do you think fans may be surprised by the way this fight plays out?
I think so. I mean, it's funny because I said it, and not very loudly at the time, and I wish I'd been more vocal about it in retrospect, but I really thought when Ronda knocked out Betch Correia, it was like the worst thing that could happen to her career because I was like, oh, God, now Ronda's going to think she's a striker, that aggression is not what Holly Holm does. She doesn't just come run up in your face and try to knock you out. She's looking to piece you up and move, and that's why I love her in this fight. I think she could maybe get the finish at some point, but I really see this potentially going all 5 rounds. And I see Holly just being the better athlete. Moving around. Her range, her movement, her athleticism. I do feel like she's the favorite here. I do. Betch is always a bit of a live underdog just because she's not afraid to get hit. I mean, she's going to walk. She's going to get in there on you. You know what I mean? Even if that means she's walking through 5 punches to deliver 1, she's going to do it. And this is an MMA fight with tiny gloves, so you never know. But I really do feel like this is Holly's fight to lose. I feel like she's the better fighter, the better athlete, and I feel like she can basically just kind of stay on the outside, move around, add up points over the course of 25 minutes, and take home with kind of a much needed decision win to get herself back in the win column.
One of the things that sort of almost bothers me about the way people refer to Holly Holm, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, John, is just the way people sort of talk about, well, Holly Holm's on 3 losses in a row, so she's kind of done, she's old news, this and that. But then when you sort of look at the people who she lost to, it's Miesha Tate, a fight that she was winning for almost all those rounds. Valentina Shevchenko, who beat Joanna in Muay Thai twice and is fighting for the title, and then Jermaine Durandamy, who a lot of people thought she won. What do you think about this notion that Holly Holm's she's almost done at this point?
Yeah, I agree that seems to be the narrative, and I think it's wrong. As you said, I mean, against Miesha, she won 98% of that fight. It's bizarre. Shevchenko. A lot of people like Shevchenko's chances against Nunes coming up here this summer. So I mean, that tells you something right there. And then the Jermaine fight was just kind of a bizarre fight overall, and I don't think Jermaine's a dirty fighter, but she definitely tagged Holly after the bell, and I think that factored in. And it was a close fight. I thought Jermaine won it, but it was a very, very close fight. So I agree. I think the notion that she's done is wrong. It's not right, and I think this will be a good opportunity for her to display that. I don't know what it does in terms of I can't see people. Let's say she does go knock out Betch in the first round. Let's say she surprises us and just gets it done in like 30 seconds. The downside, I guess, is that I don't think there's anything she could do in this fight that would have people clamoring to get her back into a title fight. You know what I mean? I can't see by going, oh my God, look what she just accomplished. Like, yes, she's got to be right there for the winner. Valentina and Amanda. That's not going to happen. But I think that's okay, and I don't think that's necessarily what Holly needs right now. I think Holly just wants, needs a win, wants to win, wants to kind of get her head on straight, wants to get that confidence built back in her, get people believing in her. I mean, listen, you guys interview fighters on basis as bold and as brash and as amazing of athletes as they are. Man, this is a sport where self-doubt creeps in. I mean, everybody before every single fight is like, what am I doing here? Is this mine? It's tough, man. It's really tough. And so there's no way the 3 straight losses isn't weighing on her at least a little bit, whether she'll publicly admit it or not. I think this if she could pick up the win here, like I think she should, I think it could be good for her personally. It may not do anything necessarily for her position in the division or the championship picture. It just does a lot for her personally and, the kind of latter stages of her career. This is a woman that's been in combat sports her whole life and has never dealt with 3 straight losses. I mean, this is a new situation for her. So, I think she wants to turn that around.
All right, General. Look, before we let you go, we want to quickly get some predictions from you for all the punters out there. It's a little bit of a tradition now. So kicking off the main card, Tarek Saffiedine versus RDA. What's your prediction for that one?
I'm going with RDA in that one. I think he's been at the higher level before, and I think he's going to rise to the occasion here. I got RDA in this one.
What about Dong Hyun Kim versus Kobe Covington? Well, how do you see this matchup going now?
got to go with Covington here. I like the kid on the rise. Tough matchup, certainly the stiffest of his career, but it's the easy money tour for Colby Covington. What are you talking about? Jump on board.
All right, you alluded to this before. Andrei Arlovski, Marcin Tybura. What's your official pick for all the punters out there?
I'm going with Arlovski. I know he's the underdog here, and I can't hate on anybody that says I'm an idiot for doing it. Maybe it's a bit of an emotional pick, but I do feel like Andre is, basically he's got more upside to his game, and even though the chin may be a little questionable right now, even though he may be the downside of his career, I think he's still got one more solid performance in him. I'm going with the here in Andrei Arlovski.
All right, and lock it in for all the money in the world. Holly Holm versus Betchkahay in the main event. What's the official prediction?
Well, don't ever put all the money in the world on an MMA fight. That's why we love the sport so much. Is crazy stuff happens from time to time. But yeah, I feel like this is Holly Holm's fight. Just from the moment it was announced. I mean, when you think about the way their styles match up, I think Betch is going to be walking into punches, and I think Holly's not going to be there to take them. So I think Holly Holm adds this thing up over the course of 5 rounds and takes home a decision win.
Well, there you guys go. Make sure to listen to the MMA Roadshow. Follow John on Twitter at MMA Junkie John. Also, check out MMA Junkie for all the amazing coverage. It's going to be a lot of great stuff coming from Singapore, so don't miss out on that. And with that, that is the end of the program. A big thank you to Roy Nelson, Tito Ortiz, Alex Volkanovski for coming onto the show. We will be back next week. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Be safe, and we'll catch you next week.